Welcome, everyone. We are marking the 5th anniversary of the Abraham Accords. We're not using the word celebrating, but there are things to celebrate, which we will be discussing in the course of the day. It's a complicated era, complicated period, as you all know. I'm Jason Isaacson. I'm the American Jewish Committee's Chief Policy and Political Affairs Officer. Before we begin with our conversation with Senator Lankford, just have some opening remarks that I'd like to deliver, but I also want to remind everyone, seeing as how we have today a sequence of conversations and presentations by members of the Senate and the House, Abraham Accords caucuses, and other policy experts who will come and join us in the course of the day. Timing is going to be a little complicated. There will be some gaps. There will be some overlap. Please be flexible. You know Washington, and we'll all deal with that together. But thank you for your understanding and your patience as we make our way through this complicated sequence. But we're so grateful that Senator Lankford is here as our opening speaker. But I wanted to begin just with some remarks on behalf of AJC. Almost exactly 2 years ago, on the roof of the Washington West End office building housing the Embassy of the Kingdom of Bahrain, AJC celebrated the 3rd anniversary of the Abraham Accords. A small group of young Bahraini, Emirati, and Israeli diplomats and civil society leaders were there, along with friends from Capitol Hill and the State Department. The Foreign Minister of Bahrain, who was in town with his country's Crown Prince to sign the U.S.-Bahrain Comprehensive Security Integration and Prosperity Agreement, CSIPA, delivered remarks, as did our host, Ambassador Al-Khalifa. It was an evening full of fellowship, common purpose, and hope. 3 weeks later, of course, on October 7th, 2023, the bright promise of regional peace and cooperation we'd celebrated that September evening was shattered as Hamas terrorists in Gaza fired wave after wave of missiles and invaded southern Israeli communities and murdering 1,200 and kidnapping 251 hostages, 48 of whom are still held, some living, some not, 23 months later. Atrocities that unleashed a justified, furious, self-defensive response by Israel, which continues to this day. That horrific assault and its aftermath, an aftermath that has essentially remade the strategic map of the Middle East, has stalled the trajectory of Arab-Israeli normalization without, it must be pointed out, reversing the historic gains that were made 5 years ago. The high toll of these last 2 years, the immense suffering of civilians in Gaza caught in the crossfire, and the continued agony suffered by the families of hostages has also made it difficult to properly, fully celebrate this milestone anniversary. But it is not difficult, in fact, it is essential to mark this anniversary, to reflect on the accomplishments of the Abraham Accords, the bold vision of the leaders of the United Arab Emirates and the Kingdom of Bahrain and later the Kingdom of Morocco, all of whom in the space of some 3 months in late 2020, working closely with a small Trump administration team, agreed to establish full relations with Israel and to discuss the continued aspirations of the signatories and of the United States to widen the circle of Arab-Israeli peace, which is what we'll be doing in the course of today, and to discuss the challenges to those aspirations that we are obligated to address. Today, in close cooperation with the bipartisan House and Senate Abraham Accords caucuses, we are fortunate to be able to feature remarks by and conversations with a number of key stakeholders in the continued success of the Abraham Accords. As I said, we've scheduled a sequence of brief segments throughout the afternoon. Please join us for as long as you can and feel free to come and go throughout our program, knowing that we'll be recording a great deal of today's content should you miss any of it live. Of course, we're also live streaming the program today. Before going further, I want to express my thanks to our Congressional Affairs team led by Jessica Burton and our Center for a New Middle East team, part of which is here in the person of our Chief Operating Officer, Benji Rogers, and part of which is in Israel this week. I also want to thank the CEO of AJC, former Congressman Ted Deutsch, for his continued leadership in AJC's efforts to expand Arab-Israeli peace and cooperation. Ted is also in Israel this week, along with AJC President Bobby Lapin, where yesterday they unveiled a commemorative plaque at the AJC Jerusalem office honoring Yaron Lishinsky and Sarah Milgram, employees of the Israeli Embassy in Washington, and dear friends of our organization who were murdered in cold blood outside an AJC event on May 21. And with that, I'd like to ask Senator Lankford if he could join us. But first, I want to introduce him. Senator Lankford of Oklahoma, founding member and co-chair of the Senate Abraham Accords Caucus, chairman of the Senate Select Committee on Ethics, a member of the Homeland Security and Intelligence Committees. Senator Lankford brings deep regional insight to today's discussion. Earlier this year, he traveled to Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon, and Israel as part of an Intelligence Committee delegation, engaging directly with key leaders and security partners on the ground. We are grateful for his steadfast leadership of the Senate Abraham Accords Caucus and his continued efforts to advance diplomatic progress and regional cooperation in the Middle East. Please join me in welcoming Senator James Lankford. Thank you. Good reminder. Yes, take off the name tag. Never looks good on camera.
Why did you do this over lunch? These poor folks are enjoying it. I have to give you bonus points for anyone who can find Rayburn Room 2060. That is the first step to global peace, is to be able to find this room, because it is in a hidden spot here in Rayburn.
I'm sorry we didn't do this in a Senate office building, but it was very good of you to schlep all the way over here for this. Senator, it is a true honor to have you with us here today. Along with your colleagues, Senator Rosen, Ernst, and Booker, you came together in a bipartisan fashion to form the Senate Abraham Accords Caucus in January 2022. Bipartisan is somewhat of a rarity these days. Can you shed light on how and why the Abraham Accords bring so much of Congress together in this bipartisan fashion?
Yeah, I think people want to see the opportunity for people to be able to talk about hard issues together where there's commonality. Israel as an ally and as a friend is a commonality across parties right now. I want to be able to maintain that and to be able to keep that going. What was interesting was when the Abraham Accords were signed, obviously it was in the final days of the Trump presidency, and then the early days of the Biden administration, there was a lot of behind-the-scenes conversation in the State Department. Are we going to keep this going? Is this a Trump thing, or is this an America thing? And myself, Jacky, Rosen, others kept coming back to the Biden State Department to say, it's not called the Trump Accords, it's called the Abraham Accords. This was designed to be able to grow, to be a functioning, living, breathing, how do we maintain normalization? So for Senator Rosen and I, especially in those earliest days on it, working through that, was very helpful, I think, to be able to say, let's take the politics and the party off of this, where it started, and talk about where it can go and what happens next. And I think it's been helpful.
So following up on that, how do we sustain and build on this bipartisan support that you and Senator Rosen were able to establish? And how do we harness that support into real momentum to assure that the Accords remain a long-term policy priority for the United States?
Yeah, this should be a model that was set up that should keep growing. All of us have talked about multiple different nations around the world that have refused to be able to recognize Israel's right to exist, and to say, how do we initiate normalization there? How do we initiate economic development, growth, investment, technology, all of those things? So for us, and for me in particular on this, I just won't talk for everybody on it. Obviously, you've got a lot of great folks that are coming in the moments ahead. I work very hard to be able to make sure the issue of Israel and the issue of Abraham Accords doesn't become a partisan thing. It is easy at this point to say this particular Democrat said that, or that particular Republican said that. They, quote unquote, they think this. I'm working to be able to push that aside and to say, for generations, we've got to be able to maintain the issue of friendship and relationship with Israel as a nonpartisan issue, not a bipartisan, as a nonpartisan issue, to say that is our ally, that is our partner in democracy, that share our values. We need to be able to work to be able to bring normalization to the area.
Senator, let me ask you about your constituency in Oklahoma. We've been all seeing polls over the last number of months about weakening support, weakening understanding, frankly, of Israel. Is that a situation that you're facing in Oklahoma, or is there continued support for this alliance that the United States has with the state of Israel?
There is continued support for Israel in Oklahoma. So if anyone's facing that in your state, there's plenty of land to buy in Oklahoma. Come open a business and come and live there. But there's continued strong support. Now, are there disagreements on things with what's happening in Gaza and those things? Of course there are. That's a normal part of a conversation. Exceptionally strong support for Israel that's in Oklahoma, and we're very, very proud of that.
Senator, the October 7th attacks, as I was briefly mentioning, and the subsequent war in Gaza have tested the resilience of the Abraham Accords. None of the three countries that we are celebrating really have backed away from the Accords, but it's been a quieter period, of course, and no one is bragging about the Abraham Accords in these countries because there's such popular dissatisfaction, and I think confusion, and I think disappointment. But how do we assess, the durability of these accords during crisis periods, and what mechanisms should be built in to maintain cooperation even during periods of regional tension?
Yeah, so let me hit that a couple ways. The worst time to make friends is when you need one. We all know that. The Abraham Accords created a moment to start friendships, normalization, business exchange, where business leaders are talking to other business leaders. It's not just government to government, it's person to person in different areas. And so when Hamas ruthlessly attacks Israel on October the 7th, 2 years ago, when that occurs, those friendships were already there. There was already a dialogue that was in place where people that were in the UAE could call friends they knew in Israel and say, we are not Hamas. That is not us. We also disagree with that. So let's figure out how we're going to maintain this ongoing conversation. It's terrible to start that conversation when you're in crisis. It's much better to be able to initiate early. That was the great strength of it. And everyone did pause and take a deep breath and say, are all of the Abraham Accords countries going to walk away from this? And that did not happen. We can talk about Sudan. That's a whole different issue in the initial formation of this. But for Morocco, for UAE, for Bahrain, they continue to be able to stay engaged. They said, hey, we need to be able to back up and be less public, but we're going to continue to be able to talk in private. And many of the harsh statements that came out from other countries didn't come out from those three. There's a difference there on that.
It's really a united front against extremism, against terrorism and extremism. And
it is. And that dialogue continues to occur. And again, we're not in full agreement on every area. It's four different nations with four different perspectives. Morocco and the UAE don't agree on everything. Okay, so we don't have to agree on everything, but we should agree on normalization, on economic development, on trade and tourism, on opportunities for both countries to be able to succeed, and for just the sharing of ideas. That should be normative on it, and it should be something that is actually expanded. And one of the areas that I've worked on a lot is, what's the benefit of being in this club? The United States needs to make a clearer statement to the world that if you join the Abraham Accords, this is what happens to trade. We change the rules on what we do on trade, on tariff, on relationships. It's different for this group, so wouldn't you like to join this club? I think that's something that we've yet to define clearly as an American government and as a State Department and in our commerce, and I think it's an area that is unfinished business.
Important. Last question, because I know you have a hard stop, Senator, and you've been very generous with your time. What are the obstacles that we're looking at to advancing the Abraham Accords Circle of Peace?
Well, let me count the ways. It's easier to find where there aren't logs in the road than where there are logs in the road at this point. Obviously, everything that's happening right now with Hamas and their actions and holding terrorists, that was the goal. I mean, I'm one of those folks. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I think it's pretty clear Hamas took action at the time they took action because they saw normalization coming with Saudi and with other areas, and so they tried to find a way to be able to interrupt that, and were successful. If long-term, this brings other nations demanding a Palestinian state and other countries, Hamas was successful. That can't be so. So I think one of the biggest challenges right now is communicating to other nations, don't show Hamas they were successful based on what your behavior changes now and your relationship with Israel in the future. Don't allow that terrorist extremist group to be the one that speaks for you and your nation. If you say you oppose extremism, then don't support their methods. So I think that's one of the areas, but that's a hard conversation to have among friends. I think it's also difficult because we have broken relationships with multiple nations. That means sitting down with people you don't normally sit down with and saying, how do we get past this? And those are not simple conversations. They're not simple conversations in the Senate. They're not simple conversations among nations as well. But those things need to be done. The opportunity to have economic trade and development, as I mentioned before, for us as a nation to develop a package of what it means to be a part of this club, I think helps smooth some of that. And so that's part of the things that we can do now.
Senator, thank you. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for your leadership on all of this for so many years and going forward as well. We look forward to continuing to work with you.
Thank you. Glad to be the kickoff. So I was the practice round for you as well. You'll enjoy a great day. I saw the agenda for the rest of the day. It was a great day for you. So thanks for allowing me to come.
Again, if you're just joining us, I'm Jason Isaacson, the Chief Policy and Political Affairs Officer of the American Jewish Committee, and we are spending the day marking the 5th anniversary of the Abraham Accords. Thank you for being here. I am pleased to introduce Representative Sheila Cherfilus-McCormick of Florida, ranking member of the House Foreign Affairs Subcommittee on the Middle East and North Africa, and a proud member of the House Abraham Accords Caucus. Earlier this year, Representative Cherfilus-McCormick traveled to Saudi Arabia, Israel, and Jordan, where she met with Prime Minister Netanyahu and other key regional leaders, gaining valuable insights into the dynamics shaping the future of the region. As a dedicated advocate for the Abraham Accords framework, the Congresswoman continues to champion the spirit of diplomatic partnership and regional cooperation that we are here to highlight and advance today. Please join me in welcoming Representative Sheila Cherfilus-McCormick to the stage.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you. I got one. You guys might be hungry. I am. I know it's noon, and I'm like, when do I eat? But thank you so much for being here. I'm so happy to be with the American Jewish Committee, and I'm so happy for what you guys have been doing. I'm even more excited that the Abraham Accords has lasted 5 years. Now, I'm sure you guys know how impressive that is, and I think it's a testament to how efficient and how it is a good solution for more and more countries. As we speak to different diplomats, different people in different countries, there's one commonality I think we all share, is that we need to strengthen the Abraham Accords and we need to get more people involved in it. This is why trade agreements in Israel and the UAE is booming, driving innovation in clean energy, healthcare, and technology. Morocco and Israel are collaborating on climate-smart agriculture. Bahrain and Israel are growing their businesses and security ties, and most importantly, people-to-people connections are thriving, with student entrepreneurs, artists, and faith leaders building bridges across cultures, all due to the Abraham Accords. That is actually a huge feat, and so we look forward to continuing pushing the Abraham Accords and increasing the people-to-people connections. So much we hear about the conflict in the Middle East and what's going on, but I think we need to put particular attention on sticking to what is working and strengthening what is working. And those people-to-people connections, having an economic agenda which everyone can thrive and have a mutually beneficial relationship is imperative in this time. So I thank everybody for being here, and just know that you have friends in Congress who appreciate your work. We love to work with organizations that really see the vision and are dedicated to actually coming to a peaceful resolution where the Middle East region is thriving economically and more people are seeing each other as beneficiaries together in one community. So thank you so much for being here, and I'm not going to keep you because I know you have experts to talk to. We're just here to do the work for you and to fight for you. So thank you for having me, and we look forward to working with you again in the future. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Congresswoman. It is now my pleasure to welcome Senator Joni Ernst of Iowa, chair of both the Armed Services Subcommittee on Emerging Threats Capabilities and the Senate Committee on Small Business and Entrepreneurship. Senator Ernst is a founding member and co-chair of the Senate Abraham Accords Caucus and has been deeply engaged in Middle East diplomacy. Just last month, she traveled to the region and met with Prime Minister Netanyahu in Israel and President Shara in Syria. As a consistent champion of the Abraham Accords framework and the author of key legislation aimed at building regional defense cooperation, including the Defend Maritime and STARS Act, Senator Ernst continues to lead efforts to strengthen security and ties and expand strategic partnerships across the Middle East. Please join me in welcoming Senator Joni Ernst. Okay. Senator Ernst, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today.
Yeah, absolutely, Benji. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to spend a moment with you and talk about issues that are very, very important to me. So thank you.
Amazing. So I want to start with the intro. You have been traveling to the region constantly since October 7th. In fact, you were part of one of the first delegations to be in Israel in the immediate aftermath of October 7th. You were in Israel last month meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu. You were in Syria meeting with President Shara. Talk to us about some of your insights from the region, from your travels. What have you learned? What do you think, as we reflect on the 5th anniversary of the Abraham Accords, what have your travels taught you?
Yes, and thank you for that. So I was actually the first delegation to enter Israel after October 7th. I was able to go into Israel on the 10th of October. I was highly discouraged by the administration, the State Department. The president was calling me, saying, you can't go into Israel. You can't go into Israel. And during one of those discussions with the State Department, I had to remind them that they're a separate branch of government, and I'm a United States Senator, and I will go into Israel because it was important to be there and support our friend and ally during that time of need. And so it was a bipartisan delegation. I had 3 other members of the House. They were all Democrats that went in with me. And so it was important that we go stand shoulder to shoulder with Israel in solidarity, show them support, make sure the others in the region knew that the United States of America was not going to back away from Israel. So it was important that we did that. Now, I've traveled 7 times since October 7th into Israel and into the region. And during those trips, I always do go to Israel. I meet with the Prime Minister. I meet with other leaders there. But I also take the time to visit our other Abraham Accords country members and prospective members as well, because we want stability, we want peace in the region. And it is important that all of those leaders know that there is the possibility of greater partnership, not only with Israel, but also with the United States. So from my perspective, we have come a long way, 5 years. I would say that, and I actually heard this from the King of Jordan, King Abdullah, on one of my visits last year under the old administration. He actually told me, and it was heartbreaking, he said, I have given up on the United States of America. Where is American leadership? And it broke my heart because they are such good partners to us. But now, this year, when I met with the King of Jordan on this most recent trip a couple weeks ago, there was a level of optimism there. He feels that American leadership is back on the scene in the Middle East. We're making sure that we're communicating with our Abraham Accords partners and others. We want stability, and they see that. And so there was a level of optimism I haven't seen for a number of years, but it is because of the Abraham Accords.
Amazing. On the subject of possible optimism, any insights from your visit in Syria? Do you think, I know there's been so many rumors, but did you leave with any sort of optimism?
I did, okay, and I am a skeptic, okay, and trust but verify, right? Trust but verify. So President al-Shara, mind you, he served in Iraq under a different force known as Al-Qaeda. So when we met, I told him I as well served in Iraq. He kind of was taken aback by that, but then we laughed. So this is an opportunity right now. Whereas before we have been on opposing forces, now is a time when we can come together for the prosperity of the region and stability in Syria. So am I skeptical? Yes, I'm skeptical, but am I optimistic? Yes, I am also optimistic. So we will give the benefit of the doubt as long as they are earning that benefit. The minute things start going south, we no longer support. And we made that very clear to the president while we were on that visit. So we know that there are forces that will want to engage in Syria. So you can look at Iran, you can look at Russia, China, you can look at the influence of Turkey in Syria. The way we stabilize and the way that we move forward with Syria is by maintaining a presence there so that we can shape and influence, exhibit leadership, so that in the end, what would be the goal is that they're looking more to the West instead of seeking partnerships with our adversaries. So again, trust but verify. I remain skeptical but optimistic.
Thank you, Senator. You mentioned your time in Iraq, and in fact, you spent 23 years in the military. During your time in the Senate, you have been one of the biggest champions for legislation that brings together the United States with Israel and its and Arab allies. Talk to us about some of these legislations: Defend Act, Maritime Act, Link Act. What is the goal? You spend a lot of time saying that by having these close alliances in the U.S., this is in the benefit of the United States. This is more and more a view that we have been seeing challenged on various sides. Talk to us about why this is such a critical aspect of security for the United States.
Absolutely. For being a small town farm girl from southwest Iowa, I have been very fortunate to be very well traveled. And I have seen the impact that American leadership has made around the globe and how important that is, whether it is mill-to-mill relationships or military-to-military relationships, whether it is through the soft diplomacy of the State Department, whether it is senior leader engagement at the level of the president and other presidents. It is important to have discussions. It is important to have those relationships. My team always knows I preach this. I preach it. Relationships matter. They matter. You must have discussions. You must maintain relationships. If you don't have a seat at the table, you are not able to shape and influence the outcome. So it is very important that the United States remain engaged around the globe. Now, I would also say presence is power. Again, being around the globe. And I have seen this more coming from the military side, but you can take a small number of men or women in the uniform of the United States and you place them in a country somewhere, and that one single soldier or Marine, they become a leader because other foreign militaries look to the United States for leadership. They don't care what that rank is. They will see a man or woman in a uniform with the flag of the United States on their shoulder, and they see them as a leader. And by having that presence, we're able to work with foreign militaries and, again, collaborate to make sure that we're creating a peaceful and stable environment. So relationships matter. Presence is power. And I've seen that demonstrated time and time again. The way I do this now in my role, I'm not in uniform any longer, but I serve in the United States Senate. I've had a number of my bills passed in the Armed Services Committee and through the National Defense Authorization Act, and I'm so grateful. But the Defend Act, the STARS Act, the Link Act, you name it, the premise of all of those bills is that we take the Abraham Accords countries and we pull them together with military cooperation and information sharing. Each one of those acts pulls us closer together. I'm also working on the Defend 2.0, which takes a look at what happened during the 12-day war and the missile barrages that have gone on. Where were we able to intercept, thanks to the Defend Act? But then where are the gaps, and how do we close down on those gaps and make sure that we're even stronger should we ever see those strikes again?
Amazing. I think that's something that we're looking forward to seeing. I wanted to follow up on this. Understanding the key importance of U.S. engagement in the relationship, something very much that AJC, I think, also follows. This week, yesterday, we saw quite a difficult situation with an Israeli attack on Hamas in Qatar. From the U.S. perspective, how how do you handle when you see complex situations like that? Where does the role of relationships come into play in a situation like we saw yesterday?
Again, relationships really do matter. And this has been, I'm not going to say a difficult balancing act. We should just take it on head on. Okay, so the president had said earlier today that he was disappointed in those strikes. We understand that Israel is in a place where they have said Hamas will be destroyed. End of story. So we support them on that effort. The problem is when you are striking a partner nation who has been working so heavily on securing peace and stability in the Middle East. And that country on this particular strike happened to be Qatar. So the president was disappointed in that. I did not feel that it furthered our relationship with those strikes when it hit Qatar. And while some of these nations, this particular country included, they don't want us to be public about the close ties and relationships we have with them or their militaries or their hosting opportunities. We know that they host Hamas at sometimes our request, but they also are home to the largest Air Force base that the United States has in the Middle East. So there is a strong relationship there, and we need to make sure that anytime we are interacting with our partner nations, that we're always putting the United States first, but that we're also working towards that peace element. And unfortunately, yesterday's strikes don't help our relationship with Qatar. At the same time, we acknowledge that Israel has stated they are going to go after Hamas.
I appreciate the candid response in a difficult and unfolding situation. Thank you. We heard news a few weeks ago that unfortunately you will not be seeking re-election. I remember talking to you actually just about 2 years ago. It was the third anniversary. Jason was talking about the third anniversary of the Abraham Accords. And we were talking about why a senator from Iowa felt so strongly about Israeli-Arab integration, Israeli-Arab cooperation. And you started talking about a liquid Band-Aid that Israel created, that they were able to, that came from like pigs within Iowa, and these insane connections that you would never really understand unless you were face-to-face with it. As you look at your tenure and as you look at the region and what you hope comes next, what do you hope that Congress can do? What legislation do you hope to see before you exit? And we are very sad on the AJC side.
Well, thank you. And yes, I did announce that I would not be seeking my third term in the United States Senate. And I'm so grateful because I do have a family that has been so supportive of me. I mentioned I'm a small town farm girl, and I never could have achieved serving in the United States Senate had it not been for the support of my parents and my beautiful daughter, Libby. Of course, over the course of 12 years, things change. I am now a grandmother, and my beautiful daughter serves on active duty. She is an Army soldier and blessed me with a beautiful grandson. So I'm a grandma, and I would love to spend more time with family, but we all have aging parents as well. And so just in order to honor my parents and my family, my calling is now to be able to spend more time with them. But because I do love the issues that I have worked on so much, and in particular when I look at the Middle East, and I am drawn to the Middle East, I believe because of my service during Operation Iraqi Freedom, and the difficulties that so many people will face around the globe, and what I saw in particular in the Middle East, we have to find a way towards peace. We really have to find a way towards peace. And so I have focused the entirety of my tenure in the United States Senate, making sure that Israel and her partners, and even those Arab nations that maybe are not partners now but have potential, continue to move forward. So I am very hopeful that even when I leave the Senate, I will be able to focus on this region and making sure that we're bringing partners together. That's yet to be determined. But in the meantime, I've got a year left, and I'm not going to slow down on these issues because they are so important to me. So I mentioned the Defend 2.0, making sure that the mill-to-mill cooperation and closing gaps when we have air and missile defense systems, making sure that those are operating to the best of our ability in those situations, making sure that we're moving forward and securing other partners to the Abraham Accords. So Saudi Arabia was on the verge. I was actually in Saudi Arabia when the attacks happened on Israel on October 7th. And when we left the meeting with MBS, we were celebrating because we knew that it was going to happen. October 7th happened, it set us back. But the potential is still there. There are other countries that want to engage in relationships with Israel. Syria is one of those. But again, trust but verify. We let them know you keep moving forward, you develop your nation, you provide opportunity for your people. We will see what we can do with Israel. So you look at Lebanon, what's happening there now. So I was able to meet with the president in Lebanon, and hopefully we will see the disarmament of Hezbollah. And if we can achieve all of these really wonderful things, we can bring more partners into the fold. So let's further the Abraham Accords. Let's bring in new partners. Let's create greater prosperity and stability for those nations. And I hope that I can see this accomplished in the next several years. But what I strive for, anything that will lead to greater safety and security for the United States of America. And that does mean by stabilizing other regions around the world.
Amazing. Senator, thank you so much. Know that AJC will be a partner with you in those efforts, something we very much cherish and hold on our heart. Thank you for your message of peace. Thank you for being with us today.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone, so much.
So I'm pleased to welcome our next guest in conversation, Congressman Brad Schneider of Illinois. A member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee and founder and current co-chair of the House Abraham Accords Caucus. Representative Schneider has been a driving force behind major initiatives promoting the Abraham Accords and expanding regional cooperation. Notably, he authored the Israel Relations Normalization Act, which reinforces the Accords as a foreign policy priority for the U.S. government. He brings valuable firsthand perspective to today's conversation, having traveled to Israel last month and having visited Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and the UAE earlier this summer, all key players in the future of regional peace and integration. His leadership reflects Congress's strong and ongoing bipartisan commitment to building enduring partnerships across the Middle East. So thank you very much, Congressman Schneider, for already coming to the stage, and we'll get started. So Congressman Schneider, last year, as part of the House Abraham Accords Caucus, you formed a bipartisan Gaza working group to prepare for post-conflict recovery. So this was particularly focused on engaging Abraham Accords partners in planning relief, reconstruction, and sustainable peace once Hamas is no longer in power. So I want to ask, what role do you see for these key parties, like Saudi Arabia, UAE, Morocco, in rebuilding Gaza? And also separately, how can Congress effectively coordinate with both diplomatic and civil society actors to ensure that economic recovery lays the foundation for long-term stability?
Great, and thank you for the question. Before I even get to answering that question, I want to go back even further. We're here marking the 5-year anniversary of the Abraham Accords. And I think, I don't know about you, I can actually remember when they were announced. I remember the day because it was August 13th. And August 13th, I was actually on the phone with a dear friend of mine who had lived in Chicago for a very long time. It's his birthday. He's an Israeli diplomat. And I was calling to wish him happy birthday when suddenly it was like, oh, news. Big news. And I don't think you can overstate how big that news was. And I was on the White House lawn when the Abraham Accords were signed. And for someone who has been committed to the pursuit of peace between Israelis and Palestinians in the broader region, this was the earth shifting. It was truly tectonic, and the hope that went with that. And then, jump ahead just a little bit, and we formed the Abraham Accords caucus, bicameral, bipartisan, Joni Ernst in the Senate, myself in the House, among others, because we knew how important it was. And Congress wasn't going to be in the driver's seat of the Abraham Accords, but Congress has a critical role to play in supporting and helping strengthen and spread the message of peace that the Abraham Accords established. In particular, the message that both Jews and Arabs belong to the same land, and that peace will be achieved when both recognize each other, and working together they can lift up the land and the people on that land. And there was great optimism 2 years ago, right around this time. Was there a possibility of a normalization between the Saudis and the Israelis? And we were literally holding our breath. And I had been to Israel, as Jessica mentioned, in August with a group of freshmen, new members, first-term members, many who had never been to Israel before. We had stood in Kfar Aza looking into Gaza, knowing where things were. The message, by the way, at that time was that things are quiet and that maybe we have good things ahead. Never has been a thought so off as that one thought, because October 7th, we know what happened, and in no small part because the progress that was being made in the Abraham Accords. And before I get to talking about the Gaza Working Group, I think we have to note that here we are almost 2 years since the start of this horrific war, and the Abraham Accords have stood strong, and the relationships between Israel and the Arab states that have signed agreements with Israel have held up, tested, strained, but still holding, and we got to make sure that they continue to hold. With respect to the Gaza Working Group, I have maybe a genetic defect. I'm preternaturally optimistic. I believe in the future, and I believe in the possibilities of peace, and that good people can find a way to live together. That good people and those who are pursuing peace must stand strong against the enemies of peace and not let the bad guys win. And from the very beginning of the war, October 7th, I remember my son woke me up at 6:30 in the morning saying there's something happening, it's different. Over the days that followed, we weren't, as we collected more and more information, the horrors of October 7th settled in. There will always be a tomorrow. We don't know what it's going to look like. So the idea, and I should introduce Gil Thompson, who is my senior advisor on many matters in foreign policy, in particular in the Middle East. And it is worth clapping for Gil. He is amazing. We were talking about it. We don't know how or when this war ends. It could last a few weeks or a few months. Remember, this is 2023. But we have to have a plan for what follows. And we have to have a plan, and there were phrases that we used, is we have to replace the terror infrastructure, the tunnels under Gaza, with the towers of opportunity, neighborhoods with schools and homes and jobs. That's the path forward. How do we get there? And again, Congress is not going to drive it, but Congress has a opportunity and a responsibility to be there to help move it forward, to help clear away obstacles and provide the fuel to move that forward. And as the war extended, and it wasn't a war of weeks or months, we're now looking, as I said, at soon to be 2 years, there has to be a future for Gaza that is distinct and free from the reign of terror of Hamas and the threats to Israel. It has to be a future if we're going to be successful in what we all are working for, it has to be a future where the Israelis can live in security and peace alongside, and the Palestinians can live in security, peace alongside each other, building their future together. And so the Gaza Working Group, in its creation, was a sense, how do we make sure that members of Congress, many of whom will have come, and now we have even more who've come post the initiation of this war, learning about Israel and the Middle East, and not decades of challenges, but millennium of history. How do we make sure that it's not necessarily top of mind, but on a back burner, ready to move forward when the opportunity presents itself? And that's what we've been doing. And we have had, last year, we had meetings with the ambassadors from the Abraham Accord countries, the Israeli ambassador, UAE, Bahrain, and Morocco. We had all together, one via teleconference because he was in, I think, Germany. We met with the ambassador from Saudi Arabia, all to make sure that our colleagues were staying engaged. And we have to keep that. We have to keep awareness, we have to build understanding, and we have to hold on to the hope that peace is possible.
Thank you. That's so critical, holding on to that hope. And I, too, am an optimist, and I think being in this business, we all need to be at some point to keep going. So you mentioned your optimism 2 years ago, and that the Accords countries haven't left during this difficult moment. Let's juxtapose that, though, with what we, I think it was last week or a week and a half ago, and there was an announcement in Israel of potential settlements, and then there's the Emiratis who have also come out, and they have a red line. So I just want to hear your reaction to that, and how does that play into this mix? How does that impact what is happening today and what we hope to see in the future?
And at the risk of repeating myself, I'm going to go back 5 years ago, not to August of 2020, but to June of 2020. And there was, at that time, talk of annexation. So the first, if I hold on to the idea that within the Abraham Accords, that both Israelis and Palestinians belong to the same land, and you have to find a way to live together on this land, that leads to, you can follow a number of different paths of assumptions to conclusions. The idea of a single state, binational state, doesn't achieve the aspiration and goals of either, and creates a permanent situation of conflict and violence, in my opinion. And so the path I've always gone down is finding a way for two people, Israelis and Palestinians, finding a way to achieve their aspirations, respecting and recognizing each other, living with security, stability, and peace, ultimately prosperity. Annexation leads down the first path and blocks the second path. And I was very concerned about that in June of 2020. It was the ambassador from UAE, Ambassador Teba, who penned an op-ed that opened a door. I joined with several of my colleagues at the time, being very outspoken against the idea of annexation at that time. All of the things that were working together, I believe, contributed to creating the possibilities of the Abraham Accords. Jump ahead 5 years, there are folks in Israel who are again talking about annexation, and what was true 5 years ago, don't go down this path or you'll lose this opportunity that is presented to us, and thankfully people on both sides grab that opportunity. I think we're at a place now, and the UAE has made this clear, that if Israel goes down that path, it has the likelihood, not the possibility, but the likelihood of cleaving the Abraham Accords to such a point that may not be recoverable. Now, as we talk about this, we also have to talk about the moves by other countries, in particular in Europe, to unilaterally recognize a Palestinian state. Recognizing a Palestinian state before the the elements necessary to be successful as a state, the institutions, having elections, having responsive government, having control of all security under one authority, it's not there yet. And building the trust. October 7th, the trust had always been strained to fractured between the Israelis and the Palestinians before October 7th. October 7th devastated that. And so to even be talking about recognizing a Palestinian state before other steps have been taken, perceived, giving the perception of rewarding the actions of Hamas on October 7th, that creates a dynamic that is also a threat. So we have to look at it on both sides, and this is where I wish we were getting a more robust leadership from the United States to say there is a future for all peoples in this region. We can't let those who are the extremists, the maximalists on either side, block the opportunities or the path that we have to move forward upon to achieve that peace, which is the Abraham Accords.
Thank you for that. And so speaking of going back to opportunity, you've emphasized the importance of people-to-people and economic connections in your work as it relates to sustaining the Abraham Accords. So I want to ask, what role do you see for American businesses, especially in sectors like clean energy, ag tech, fintech, and how can these help deepen commercial ties among the Accords countries? And also, you mentioned the congressional role in helping to support. So how can Congress help facilitate more U.S. private sector engagement in these regional partnerships?
Great question. I'll split into three pieces. The people-to-people first, right? Understanding between peoples is achieved not by heads of state, but by building bridges and connections between the folks who make up each state. And that's true whether you're talking about relations between the United States, our neighbors, countries around the world, but in particular in the case in the Middle East. And I know when I lived in Israel 1983 to 1984, it was easy to drive around the country without any barriers or obstacles. I had the chance to talk to people of all different backgrounds. And my understanding when I got to Israel, this was the year right after I graduated college, I'd never been to Israel before. Meeting people, meeting Arabs and Israelis, meeting Israelis who'd come from Arab countries, you expand your understanding and you expand your appreciation of each other. Today, if you go through the region, whether you're in Israel or in the West Bank, likelihood of talking to young people, and I'm going to put young people between 15 and 30-year-old range, saying, how many people of the other side do you know? Odds are they have never spoken to someone on the other side. That breakdown is critical. So we have to build the people-to-people connections, not just between Israelis and Palestinians, but across the region, and creating the surrounding organizations following the Abraham Accords. If I look what's been happening between the Abraham Accords countries, so many different groups came in, NGOs, government-supported organizations, that's critical. And I think where Congress can have a role, the Nita Lowey Middle East Peace Initiative, we've been funding some of these, trying bridge building. We can do more of that. But at the end of the day, people's economic interests kind of rise above all. In politics, there's a saying, it's the economy, stupid. If you can build economic bridges between people, if you can build connections of folks who have extraordinary ideas but need capital, and people who have capital looking for extraordinary ideas, and you can do it where the boundaries of countries have less significance than the opportunities provided by the ideas and the capital, you start building those bridges. And I can think of so many different cases. There's a reason that so many tech companies have planted roots in Israel around research and development, because it benefits the companies. And Israel, it benefits Israel, and it goes together. If you can start expanding those roots, again, fundamental beliefs, I believe that all people have the capacity to be extraordinary in their creativity and their potential to succeed if given the chance. If you can expand that research possibility to the entire region, you can bring the capital of the Arab states. Many of them have sovereign wealth funds because of their oil and are looking for ways to diversify. you start building those ties. So it is a combination of, at the first level, personal connections, relationships, trust between people, supported by institutions, both government and non-government, and then the economy becomes a piece of it.
So speaking of building bridges, you are also, in addition to co-chair of the Abraham Accords Caucus, you are co-chair of the Congressional Hellenic Israel Alliance, CHIA, another caucus that AJC is proud to support. And so talk to us about the link between agreements like the Abraham Accords, the East Mediterranean Gas Forum, and also IMEC, India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, and how they benefit Americans and how they can in the future.
Thanks for the question. I think, look, we're on the cusp. There's times in human history where things change. You reach a disconnect in change in technologies. And the rate of those moments are shrinking, from early periods till agriculture was a long time. You can run through the whole history. I want to run through the history of the world. But we are at one of those moments, whether it's advances in AI, quantum computing, the need for the energy to support all of these, the need to address providing the energy, growing energy demands at a time where how we do it will have an impact on how the climate and atmosphere respond, those challenges that are existential, but that human creativity and endeavor can tackle. We're just at one of these extraordinary moments. And energy is going to be a key piece of that. Countries that have energy, countries that need energy. The Middle East, it's called the Middle East for a reason. It is in the middle. But you can think India on one side of that middle, Europe on the other side of the middle, and you draw the line, and it is, if you can create, IMEC, the India Middle East corridor, you can build that. It is a place to move energy back and forth, but also goods and services, and do it in a way of working with people who are again, pursuing peace. That's critical. And the Eastern gateway of that vision is, this is why CHIA is so important. We're talking about Israel, we're talking about Cyprus, we're talking about Greece. As we look to the day after and the future for Gaza, a Gaza that is post this war, a Gaza that's given the opportunity not just to rebuild, but to renew, to be a piece and a part of that. Egypt, all of this is connected. So if we can create the foundations for commerce and trade, for moving energy from where it is in the earth or coming from the sun, opportunities for solar, and getting it to where it's being consumed, you're going to create those connections between the governments and between people. So that has to be a part of it. So I think CHIA is vitally important to that. I think IMEC is vitally important to that. And I think there'll be new and other ideas that will help be a part of that in the future as well.
Thank you. And you mentioned gateways, so you actually have legislation called the Gateway Act. And so if you want to give just a 2-second.
Thank you. So yeah, we do have the IMEC Gateway Act because we have to look at the opportunities for this India-Middle East corridor, not being an arrow going from India up to through the Middle East and into Europe, but going both ways. And if we can build that relationship, so we are hopeful that this is going to move forward. And in a Congress where very little legislation can get traction, we believe this is one that we can bring both parties together to move on.
Thank you. So you've traveled in the region. You've been in Israel since the October 7 terrorist attacks. Based on your firsthand experience and your conversations in the region, how are regional leaders and communities thinking about the Israeli-Palestinian file? What is on their minds at the moment? What is the sort of this moment that we're in? Are there viable opportunities or emerging pathways for progress here towards a sustainable resolution?
There are viable opportunities and pathways. I mean, I see the most obvious pathway is the Abraham Accords, and we've got to hold that and create those opportunities. This trip I took last month, we met with both Prime Minister Netanyahu, but also the Prime Minister of the PA, Mustafa Mohammed. You are dealing right now, I believe, let me qualify this, I'm an engineer. That doesn't make me an expert in all things, it just makes me think I'm an expert in all things. And I'm not a sociologist or a psychiatrist, but the peoples in this area are traumatized on all sides. And it is something that we as Americans sitting here thousands of miles away can't fully comprehend. But what I believe we bring to the table is ability in a period, in a region so abjectly affected by trauma that it's hard to see the distant horizon. Our distance here gives us the ability to see the possibility for that peace on the horizon. We have to hold that. So, I don't know that you'd find any, if certainly not many Israelis who are ready to talk about making a long-term commitment to a two-state solution peace with Israel. We shouldn't be talking to them. You have to see this, because right now what they see is there are 48 hostages in Gaza. We want our hostages back. And we're in a public space. I usually would have expletives to that. Give us our hostages back. You're looking at a Palestinian people who are saying we want to be able to rebuild our homes, provide for our children. Give us what we need to do that. We here have a responsibility, but I hope also the ability to see both sides and see what the possibility is moving forward, and recognize that, A, this war needs to end. It needs to end as soon as possible, immediately. Bring every single one of those hostages home, reuniting them with their families, not just the living, but the deceased. Surging aid into Gaza, making sure that the people of Gaza have the fundamental basic needs of food, medicine, but then once the war is ended, getting Hamas out of Gaza so that the people of Gaza can rebuild and build new communities and build a vision for their future that isn't a threat to Israel, but a promise to their children.
And you mentioned the hostages, so I also just want to take a moment to thank you for your leadership in Congress, advocating for the release of all of the hostages. And it's so important what you and your colleagues are doing to draw attention to this. If I can ask you on that note, share what you have been doing as it relates to the hostages. How are you, making sure that this is a priority for the U.S. government, that this, remains an active conversation, and that you and your colleagues have this at the forefront of their minds, and the hostages are not forgotten?
The most important thing we can do is make sure the hostages aren't forgotten. I wear my yellow pen every day on my lapel, wherever I am, irrespective of where I am. I have a yellow wristband. The hostage dog tags was giving me a rash on my neck, so I carry it on my keychain. So it's always on my mind. We have to make sure it's always top of mind for other people. I was at a charity dinner last week in Chicago where Rachel and John Goldberg spoke. They're from the Chicago area. And Rachel gave extraordinary remarks. These are two of the most impressive, powerful, heroic people. But Rachel finished her remarks is, may the hostages come home tonight. And we have to always pray, may the hostages come home tonight. May this war end today. We have to keep a focus on this, and we can't let anyone forget. And within the confines of these halls, with my colleagues, I have the pictures of the hostages outside my wall for all to see. And my office is just down the hall from the place where everyone does their press conferences in the Cannon building. So it's having the pictures. Every hostage parent I've met, I have their child on my wall in my office. So I see every hostage is on that wall. It's making sure that's there. We have to ensure that the hostages are not forgotten, that all the victims of this war are suffering. This war can end when Hamas releases the hostages and ends its threats against Israel.
Thank you. You said it so well. We need to ensure that they are not forgotten, that the world does not forget about them, and we need to ensure their safe release and that everybody returns home to their families. Let me ask you one final, just give us some words of wisdom, give us some optimism here.
So the wisdom I'll give you, and then I will give you optimism. We were laughing back there. I thought I was grabbing a grape, and I grabbed a tomato, which was a shock because I was hoping for something sweet. So the wisdom is, it's knowledge to know that a tomato is actually a fruit. It's wisdom to know not to use a tomato in your fruit salad. The optimism is there's always a tomorrow. And we in our country tend to think of history, ancient history, being, we're going to celebrate our 250th birthday next July. That seems like a long time. In the Middle East, we are talking about histories that go back more than 3,500 years. Jericho has been continuously occupied as a city for, I believe, more than 5,000 years. The Jewish people have lived in the land of Israel continuously for 3,500 years. There is a long history. And if you have the privilege of walking around Jerusalem and the wall around the old city, it's a Turkish wall. And the Turkish control of Jerusalem was 400 years from, if I think I have the dates right, it's 1516 to 1918. Right? That all seems like ancient history, but it's the relatively recent history for the Middle East. The Middle East has a long future the same way it has a long history. Our role, our responsibility, and the ability to hold on to optimism is to make sure that that's a future that gives hope to all the people there and brings peace. Because peace in the Middle East, and I'm talking not just between Israelis and Palestinians, but the broad region writ large, is not just good for the people of the Middle East. It will make the people of the United States more safe, more secure, and more prosperous. So our stakes are there, and we'll stay focused on it.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your important work, for leading this bipartisan group, and the many bipartisan groups that you do lead on Capitol Hill, and we appreciate your partnership here. So thanks for being with us.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Yeah, so Jason began by saying this is Capitol Hill and things may be in flux. So I am proud to present the influx portion of the program. Jason and I really wanted to take the time during this discussion for AJC to reflect on the 5th anniversary of the Abraham Accords, for AJC to reflect on what's going on in the region right now. So who better to do that with than our esteemed Chief Policy and Political Affairs Officer. So throughout this program today, Jason and I will be in a series of small discussions. So I'll start with some simple questions. First of all, do you know which country you're in?
Thank you, Benji. I just returned yesterday from being in the Gulf for 3 days. I was in Abu Dhabi and briefly in Bahrain. AJC opened an office in Abu Dhabi 4 years ago, a little over 4 years ago, to do what we could as a non-governmental organization to advance the spirit, the vision of the Abraham Accords. And I attended a conference in Abu Dhabi called the Hilly Forum, talked about the U.S. role in international affairs, U.S. responsibilities, but also the challenges and the opportunities that the Middle East now presents. So yes, I do know where I am right now, but you also travel a great deal, and AJC has important work to do. We will continue to do so in the Middle East and around the world with our 15 international offices.
Thanks, Jason. Our former CEO, David Harris, is famous for the word zeitgeist. The feeling...
Invent the word, but yes.
He did not invent the word, no, but he certainly used it quite a bit. Yes. What is the feeling of the age? You started off today in your opening speech talking about this is not necessarily a celebration, it's commemoration, but it's a pivotal moment to be able to do that. I wake up some days not knowing whether it is going to be a bad day or whether we are going to see Abraham Accords 2.0. Can you share some reflections, both from within the United States and from within the Middle East? What is the zeitgeist of the day?
Look, I think not so different from what we just heard from Congressman Schneider, which is there is still optimism, some hope that we will be able to advance after the war in Gaza is over, because of the remaking of the Middle East that we've seen over the last couple of years, especially, and because of the commitments that were made by the brave visionary leaders of the UAE and Bahrain and Morocco, and of course the United States leadership, we will get to a better place. It'll require the end of the current conflict, without question. We will reach that place. But from, as you know, because you've been part of this program for years as well, what we keep hearing from leaders across the region, and not just the government leaders, but also business leaders and people in civil society organizations, they want to see a better future. They know the possibilities that exist for cooperation, for greater prosperity, for sharing of technology. As you remember, Benji, in May and June of 2020, before the announcements of the Abraham Accords, we were hearing in AJC webinars leaders of the UAE talking about the possibility of public health cooperation during the COVID crisis with Israel. It is so apparent when one speaks to leaders across the region, they know what their countries can gain from that kind of relationship. And as well as the partnership with the United States. The U.S. role in moving forward these Abraham Accords, of course, was essential. We will continue to see that leadership. We are seeing it from the current administration. That engagement we heard from Senator Ernst, of course, especially, that's not going to stop. And of course, our organization is not going to stop. So the zeitgeist, anxiety mixed with hope, very concerned about the kinetic developments yesterday. We'll be talking about that further in the course of the day today. Important effort to go after Hamas leadership, but obviously very complicated in doing so in a country that is a partner of the United States. Again, so many days we wake up, you and I both, and many other people, probably everyone in this room, hopeful and also anxious.
So I want to push a little bit more on that kind of mentality, the hope and the anxiety, which I think definitely represents the way I feel many times. But let's take the last week, for example. We were preparing for we were preparing for celebration of 5th anniversary, commemoration of the 5th anniversary. At the same time, we were talking about and reading about Israeli attack on Hamas in Doha, UAE coming out and saying, hey, this is a red line. Help us, when you read these things, what is the balance? How do you make sense of this? And this will be our last question in our back and forth until after lunch, because the Congresswoman just arrived as well.
So what does it come down to? It comes down to a need for leadership. It comes down for people actually being able to make good on the vision that was expressed in 2020. We have seen that repeatedly, I must say, from the leaders of the United Arab Emirates and the Kingdom of Bahrain and the Kingdom of Morocco, where they have stood by these agreements, even in very difficult times, even when there is clear opposition from their own public about the course that they've been on for the last 5 years. We see it, of course, from the White House. We see it from members of Congress who have been here today and will be here in the course of the afternoon. Everyone knows the direction we need to go. There are huge challenges. There's a challenge of extremism on many sides. We mustn't forget, though, the atrocities that were committed on October 7th needed to be answered forcefully. Israel cannot tolerate, no country could tolerate the kind of attack that took place on October 7th and the continued suffering of the hostage families and the people of Israel as they see the terrorist actions that took place on those days and the continued holding of hostages. But we'll get past this, as you know, and we will go back to the visions that were expressed in 2020 that AJC has long supported. We believe in advancing accommodation, political settlement between the Israelis and Palestinians. We have to get back on that course. We can't do it immediately, but we have to get back on that course. There has to be a political vision.
Okay,
political horizon.
To be continued. We will pick this up
we
shortly.
will do that. Thank you, Benji.
So I am I'm delighted to introduce Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz of Florida, one of the newest co-chairs of the House Abraham Accords Caucus and a longtime member of the House Appropriations Committee. She is coming straight from a markup in between, so we hope to have her as long as we can. But Representative Wasserman Schultz has played a pivotal role in shaping bipartisan efforts to strengthen relationships between Israel and its Arab neighbors and to lay the groundwork for lasting regional normalization and cooperation. As the sponsor of legislation and other initiatives supporting people-to-people programs and cooperative research across the Middle East and North Africa, she's been a leading voice in fostering dialogue, mutual understanding, and peace building. So please join me in welcoming Representative Wasserman Schultz to the stage.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. I appreciate your kind introduction and the opportunity to be here with, for me, what is an organization that is very near and dear to my heart. I took my first trip to Israel when I was 27 years old with the American Jewish Committee. That was a long time ago, and it was a transformative experience for me, and where the culmination of my disparately knowing that I was a Zionist really was able to be crystallized very clearly on that trip, which is what the trip is for. So it was also one of those trips that was apparently, for young electeds that might hopefully one day get elected to Congress, and so that worked out in my case, about a dozen years later. So I'm really glad to be able to be here, and like I said, I have a special place in my heart for AJC, not only because I, found my Zionism on your trip, but also because one of my dearest friends is now your CEO. So it's lots of reasons to love AJC. We have a few dozen amendments, and our appropriations markup right now, and we were in a markup for 13 hours until after midnight last night, and expect to be close to that tonight. So forgive me if I kind of go in and out, but I wanted to make sure that I came down and had a chance to talk to you as one of the co-chairs of the Abraham Accords Caucus. And I really have to say I was so thrilled to be asked to be one of the co-chairs for this Congress, because I'm so proud of what we've been able to build together when it comes to the Abraham Accords, because those accords are not only about Israel's security, but protecting them is vital for Israel, obviously, but they're a crucial platform for advancing regional peace, projecting American values and objectives, and reducing our military responsibilities in the Middle East. And I have been able to see firsthand when taking Abraham Accords-focused trips to the region and speaking and meeting with the leaders of these Abraham Accords countries to really understand how valuable those accords are in terms of really cutting through all of the noise and controversy and strife and agony, and being able to make sure that we could have another pathway to normalizing those relations. And it really is clear to me that we need to continue to forge those relationships and be assertive about it. I mean, our task really is to move from first steps to what's practical, so we can have lasting structures that serve U.S. interests while advancing what is really a viable political horizon. Now, for me, before I outline the path ahead, a vote. Okay. So I will have to pause then, because, and I will be back, piece. And from my perspective, here's how we do it. Through security, prosperity, and progress. First, security. The next phase of the Abraham Accords should focus on deepening defense coordination to counter Iran and its proxies, who really are at their weakest point in recent memory. Building an integrated air and missile defense network that shares early warning. Expanding joint air defense and maritime coordination from the Red Sea to the Arabian Sea so U.S. shipping and crews are safer. Increasing combined exercises that promote readiness and lower the burden on U.S. forces over time. And investing in interoperability, helping our partners field common systems and platforms that are made in America. This strengthens Israel's qualitative military edge, deters Iran and its proxies, and safeguards U.S. citizens, diplomats, and service members. Second, prosperity. The accords should deliver tangible economic value for American workers. We should break down barriers for investment and R&D to put U.S. technology to work on the challenges facing this region. American companies are positioned to deliver clean energy, desalination, and next-generation grid technology. Conflict over scarce resources has driven countless wars in this region. If we promote innovation, we can ensure Middle Eastern nations are economically diversified and resilient to climate change. And finally, our involvement can ensure that at every step along the way, we're opening new markets for U.S. small businesses. More economic integration will prevent wars over resources and create opportunities for American producers. The promise of development and access to emerging technologies will also motivate more countries to sign on to normalization. And that leads me to my last point, which is progress. We should seize diplomatic opportunities to expand the Abraham Accords and think carefully before taking any actions that would cause setbacks. I also want to just, as an aside, which I don't have time for, but I'm going to do anyway, really what I noticed in traveling to Abraham Accord countries and meeting with their leadership is this is a grass tops movement. Honestly, there is a lot of understanding and appreciation for the Abraham Accords and harmonious relationships that have developed and symbiotic relationships between businesses. But the problem for the leadership of the Abraham Accords countries is that that has not seeped down into the populace and the grassroots. The grassroots would just as soon have the Abraham Accords go away and continue to hate Israel. So making sure that we are fostering those dialogues and being able to have that harmony and those relationships seep deeper down into society will make it easier and take the pressure off of those leaders to, issue statements that some of them issued after October 7th that were less than condemnation and that were even worse than that. Some did send out the right message, but we need to make sure that they are buttressed by support from their own grassroots in the populace. We have to pursue near-term openings with countries like Mauritania and with Azerbaijan, which already maintain strong ties with Israel, and they could join in an Accords Plus framework. I'm getting the high sign again. We have to maintain patient, serious tracks of engagement with Saudi Arabia, Indonesia, and Oman. And we have to make sure, because we are at a crossroads with the Abraham Accords, that we recognize that progress could be squandered by any steps that permanently foreclose a two-state future. Congress has a role here as well, one that we are tirelessly pursuing, and that includes aid implementation, development programs, and grassroots peace building. And unfortunately, USAID and the State Department cuts have set us in the wrong direction. We need to continue to fight back against that. I am sorry I have to cut my remarks short because I have to go cast another vote. But thank you so much for having me.
All right, it is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Dana Stroul, who's the Director of Research and Shelley and Michael Casson Senior Fellow at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. Prior to that, Dana was the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Middle East at the Defense Department. Prior to that, she also spent a lot of time on Capitol Hill as the professional staff member on the Senate side for the Senate Foreign Affairs Committee. Dana, we are honored to be here. I always mention whenever we are honored to have Dana on stage is that we have engaged many people throughout our tenure, and Dana has always been a close and open friend to AJC. And so we are so excited to be able to welcome her to the stage today. Okay. Hi, Dana. Thank you for being here.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me. Always a fan of AJC and the work that you all do.
When we talk about the Middle East, it seems every day there is a new serious development, and that was certainly true of yesterday. Help us understand what happened yesterday with the Israeli attack in Doha, the Israeli attack on Hamas. I know there's still a lot we don't know. I know this is still developing, but help us understand how you see this. What is the impact?
So, first of all, in terms of the impact, I think it's important to wait for the details to come out. The battle damage assessment has not come out yet. There's a lot of details about what happened that we don't know. It appears that the Israeli strikes in downtown Doha did not successfully kill the senior political leadership of Hamas, who were having a meeting in a building down there. So the risk here is that it's a worst case scenario, which is that now these political leaders are going to be even less incentivized to negotiate, more incentivized to dig in and resist. We lose the role of Qatar in mediating with these negotiations. Everyone here has probably been following that this has been a negotiation where Qatar and Egypt have played mediating roles along with the United States between Hamas and Israel. But we don't know. So I think the questions are, what impact did the strike yesterday have on the possibility of getting to a ceasefire? And then number two, did the strike and that action make stabilizing the Middle East and getting back to some of the big possibilities that I think still remain on the table, like expanding the Abraham Accords? We are, of course, here for the 5-year anniversary of the Abraham Accords. So does the Israeli strike in Doha yesterday make expanding the Abraham Accords, make working with allies and partners in the Middle East and Israel and the United States more or less within reach or not? And frankly, we don't know yet. So I want to be very humble in how I assess the situation. From an Israeli perspective, I think there are a few things going on. The first is that obviously they are on the cusp of launching this very significant military operation in northern Gaza. Number two is that for more than a year, there's been negotiations, again, through this multilateral mechanism for a phased ceasefire. And of course, in recent weeks, that had changed with an all-for-all agreement, where it's not just about releasing the hostages that Hamas holds in phases, but releasing all of them all at once. With President Trump at one point talking about like complete dismantlement, Hamas leaving Gaza, et cetera. And then in recent days, Trump putting a new ceasefire proposal on the table and saying Hamas agreed to this or else. So I think a question going forward is, was yesterday the or else? We don't know yet. Number two, so one is the cusp of this big military operation, which for Israel is that the only action that has compelled Hamas to make any concessions and release any hostages since October 7th has been military pressure. And if you look at the Israeli experience since October 7th, for them, military pressure has succeeded in getting hostages out of Gaza. Number two is a lot of frustration and a belief that Hamas was never going to agree to any ceasefire terms that would actually make Israel more safe and secure. And then number three is what happened only in the days before the strike yesterday, which is that there was a massive terror attack in downtown Jerusalem that was tied to and directed by Hamas, apparently. So again, the Israeli society is continuing to wrestle with Hamas-directed and sponsored terrorism within the state of Israel. So Israelis don't feel safe. There has, of course, been long-time criticism of Doha, of Qatar, for hosting the political leadership of Hamas. And here, I think it's important that we all hold the uncomfortable and inconvenient history of this topic, which is that the United States has never asked the Qatari government to expel Hamas leadership from Doha. In fact, at the end of the Biden administration, Secretary Blinken said, okay, Hamas, the political leadership in Doha, is not delivering anything on actually advancing ceasefire talks. They should be expelled. They were expelled. And then Steve Witkoff, the presidential envoy of President Trump, before the inauguration said, actually, we need you to bring them back to Doha because I need somebody to talk to. There's a lot of blame on Qatar for its role in supporting Hamas, all of that financial assistance that was going into Gaza for all of the years before October 7th. The uncomfortable and inconvenient truth is that that was done with the complete support, wittingness, and facilitation of the government of Israel. So not only was it out in the open, the Qataris weren't hiding it, Israel was facilitating it. The Qatari ambassador to Gaza was coming in to Gaza through Ben Gurion Airport. And the United States was very aware of and did not object to that financial assistance to Gaza, which for a long time everyone was lulled into believing was buying down the risk of more terror attacks in Israel. And now what we know is the disproven assumption that Hamas was more interested in maintaining its governance position in Gaza than risking all of its position. So where we are today is that at the end of the day, I think, for the Trump administration, let's not forget the president did a 3-country stop in the Middle East. He did not go to Israel. He went to 3 Gulf countries. His final stop was Qatar, and not only Qatar, but he visited the Al Udeid Air Base, which does get a lot of attention here in the United States. He visited that airbase. That was the airbase that was attacked by Iran. Only a couple months ago, at the end of the 12-day war, ballistic missiles shot at that airbase. And now you have a U.S. partner, Israel, taking a strike in downtown Doha. And this is a country that's a major non-NATO ally, something that the Trump administration has endorsed. The Trump administration is continuing to do a lot of work with Qatar. And remember, these governments and people want to be the center of stability and economic growth in the Middle East. And what I think they're looking at right now is are both our partners, like Israel, Abraham Accords country, and our adversaries like Iran, going to see the Gulf as the new battlefield in the Middle East. And I think that's making a lot of folks very nervous and very uncomfortable. Final remark on this, I was really watching the different statements that came out of governments across the region. It is really disappointing that not one government acknowledged Hamas, the Hamas role. I think everyone probably understood that these guys were dead men walking eventually, but at this moment in time, when Hamas still holds 20 living and dozens more bodies of Israelis that we all want back, that Hamas disarming and dismantling is key for building a better future in Gaza. Was now the right time to do this the way they did it? I think it's an open question. But what's very clear is everyone else in the region is aligned that this was a strike on Qatar. This is about Qatari sovereignty. We've seen really a shoring up of Arab leaders' alignment with and defense of Qatar. What we need is to get back to a place where we're all working towards what I think is a shared objective still, which is not having Iran rebuild its ties to Hamas, not having Hamas be able to rebuild its terror infrastructure and maintain its political stranglehold in Gaza.
Thank you. There was a lot in that answer that I want to unpack. Starting from what you talked about, will this put pressure? Will this do anything in terms of hostages? Do we have any indication right now? I also, tied to that, within Israel especially, there's been a lot of discussion on, is Qatar a helpful partner in this? Are they doing enough? Should we rely more on the Egyptians? Hey, it was the Egyptians who we worked with to be able to cut the Shalit deal. We have not seen that necessarily from the Qataris. Do you have any sense from your perspective of where we are on that question?
First of all, I think we're in an exceptionally high moment of risk for the living hostages. So my first reaction after yesterday was thinking about these young men and thinking about how the remaining military leadership of Hamas hiding in the tunnels, surrounding themselves with living hostages and the bodies of Israelis in the tunnels of Gaza, are thinking about what their next steps and options are for response. And I'm very, very worried about the hostages. Number two, to negotiate a ceasefire, you have to have somebody to negotiate with. So I think there's an open question as to what happens, no matter how difficult those leaders who were living very nice, fancy lives in Doha, what it means who you talk to, if they're not there or they're unwilling to play that role. And right now, it looks like Qatar's refusing to continue to play a mediating role. So all eyes on Egypt now. We'll have to see whether Egypt is willing to step into this role, whether or not Egypt is going to say, sure, we're willing to host Hamas delegations in Cairo. Is there a risk that this was a one-off thing, or are some of U.S. partners, and by the way, peace treaty partners with Israel, are these governments going to say, yeah, hosting bad guys in order for us to talk to them to get something we want, is that a good idea for our security and our people? So I think there's a lot of open questions about what this means, whether it opens up opportunities. Final thought on this. If the idea that more military pressure and doing things to affect the negotiating environment is going to induce the remaining Hamas leadership in Gaza to be more flexible, what I worry about is that it's applying a rational model of acting and thinking to these people. They're terrorists. Their goal is to survive, and they are obviously supportive of committing acts of terror in order to achieve political objectives. So the idea that the people in Gaza were clearly not taking advice from the political leadership in Doha, have been actually hardened into thinking through how to resist as an entity inside Gaza, are now going to look around and say, well, after Hezbollah fell, after Bashar al-Assad is gone, after the militias in Iraq are taking a knee, after Iranian air defense, Iranian ballistic missiles and their nuclear program has set back, and after nobody stood up for us, but now, because those 5 guys in Doha were targeted, now we're really willing to negotiate the full deal. I hope I'm wrong, but I just think we have to question the idea that those people stuck in a tunnel with limited information and understanding about what's fully going on in the outside world is going to now like turn the tables and be more flexible negotiating. It is also true that they probably have limited but some information about the outside world. And what they've generally, I think, been sensing is empowerment and doubling down because of the criticism of Israel, because of European countries saying, well, we're going to recognize Palestine at the UN. And now, if there appears to be daylight about exactly what happened between the United States and Israel, again, the risk is that these guys in Hamas are like, no, now's the time to hold out, not to negotiate.
The end of your opening statement, you mentioned how the Gulf.
What did I say?
You mentioned how the Gulf is viewing the attack, and what does this mean? And is there still this unity of Middle East cooperation in opposition to Iranians? You spent a lot of your time at DoD dealing with this issue. Arguably, when we talk about the Abraham Accords, one of the most successful components of it is the military cooperation. And we've seen this multiple times, particularly when you have Iranian attacks on Israel. As we reflect on the 5th anniversary, where do you see this military cooperation headed? How are things such as what happened yesterday going to impact that? We heard from the Emiratis responses to issues of annexation. How are all these things linked? At the same time, we're seeing a weakening in Iran as well. So help us understand where we are at in the military cooperation. In the past, people have said, well, look, diplomacy is at a low point, but there's all this military cooperation that happens behind the scenes. Are we at that point still? Shed some light on this.
So first of all, last April 2024, the Multilateral Air Defense Coalition was proof of concept that military integration and cooperation can save lives and defend the airspace and the sovereignty of everyone in the region. And we were working on this for years. That did not magically happen in the 2 weeks that Iran choreographed what it was going to do. It takes political leadership. It takes military leadership. It takes convening meetings at different levels, all sorts of information sharing agreements, a level of trust in order to share radar pictures so that everyone has better advanced warning of the threats, the Iranian missiles and drones coming. Huge effort. So last April was proof of concept that multilateral security cooperation can work. And what is remarkable to me, 5 years after the Abraham Accords and 2 years after October 7th, there's no question that there is significant criticism of Israel, especially for its operations in Gaza. There's not a lot of criticism of Israel that I'm hearing for setting back Iran's nuclear program, for degrading Hezbollah to the point where we can actually imagine a different future for Lebanon, for degrading the Iranian and Russian support for Bashar al-Assad, which enables a leader who actually will talk about the possibility of some sort of security arrangement with Israel. I mean, it is remarkable to think about 2 years after October 7th, there are real leaders in Damascus and Beirut who say the word Israel, who will coordinate with Israelis, who will contemplate the idea of maybe not normalization, but something. This is significant. And Saudi Arabia has not actually taken normalization off the table. The Abraham Accords countries, Morocco, UAE, Bahrain, exist today, even though they're not accelerating. And the peace treaty countries, Jordan and Egypt, still, those peace treaties have not been abrogated. So the strategic architecture for Israel further integration exists. And I also think when you look at Israel's military achievements over the past 2 years, if you're in the intelligence community or the uniformed military of any country in the region, you have to look at that and say, well, I want to be on that team. I want to learn their capabilities. I would like some of that intelligence, please. Let's continue to figure out. I might not want to publicly own it, but behind the scenes, I'm going to continue to work with you. The risk of yesterday. Remember, Qatar hosts the Air Operations Center, which means that we need to be able to work with Qatar for everyone to get access to what's happening in the Air Operations Center, for liaison officers to get in there, for the United States to serve as the hub and then push all that information back out. So the difference is this time Israeli military action didn't happen on what everyone sort of agrees is an adversary. That wasn't Iran, it wasn't Hezbollah in Lebanon, it wasn't Bashar al-Assad's infrastructure in Syria. That was a major non-NATO ally of the United States who is actively participating in diplomatic processes. Remember, the Gulf Rift was not that long ago. Well, now we have the leader of the UAE who years ago was, the leader of the Gulf Rift in isolating Qatar. He just went to Qatar. And proof of concept that integration and continuing work in the military world was happening. I heard reports that the Dubai Air Show 2 years ago, you wouldn't believe how many Israeli booths were there. One of the Israeli defense firms, Elbit, just announced a very significant co-production agreement with the UAE. Well, this morning the Dubai Air Show said Israel's been disinvited. So the risk is actually that these kinds of actions do set back the cause of normalization and integration.
Dana, you have given us a tremendous amount to think about. We're going to wrap up right now, but in a short statement, as we look back on the 5 years, what do you think has been most successful, and what do you want to continue to see as we look forward?
Most successful of the Abraham Accords is the people-to-people ties. For those of you who may remember, January 22 or 23 was the Negev Forum. 23, thank you. It's my years run together. So what was remarkable about that to me was I watched these working groups, public health professionals, education professionals, tourism professionals, nothing in the middle. I was like the odd man out as the security person, the defense person. From all of the Abraham Accords countries and some of the peace treaty countries coming together and actually thinking about how we can build on the Abraham Accords to deliver real meaningful action for people. it is amazing to think about since the Abraham Accords, Israelis, they got to go to Doha for the World Cup. There were more flights from the UAE to Israel after October 7th when everybody, even US carriers, cut off those flights. Israeli tourism to UAE. We had Israelis, on visits to Bahrain. This is really significant. This is not something we imagined 3 years ago when I was an undergrad in college. So anyway, the people-to-people ties and the opportunities, you all, defense, tech, innovation, entrepreneurship, it's all right there. And it's still on the table, and it's still a possibility.
Dana, thank you so much for being with us. It's now my pleasure to call Jason Isaacson back to the stage.
For those who are just joining our live stream, I'm Jason Isaacson. I'm AJC's Chief Policy and Political Affairs Officer, and very pleased to be sitting alongside Ambassador Yael Lempert, a longtime friend, who just completed her 27-year career in the U.S. Foreign Service as ambassador to Jordan. 28. The MEI press release says 27. Okay. Okay, started last week as director vice president for outreach of the Middle East Institute, a distinguished think tank in Washington. Yael has a long, distinguished career. She served in multiple locations across the Arab world, but not just the Arab world, also in Shanghai, I saw, and in London, of course, as the deputy chief of mission, was acting assistant secretary of state for Near Eastern affairs, et cetera, et cetera. Yael's service in Jordan at the time of the October 7th, 2023 atrocities in Israel. I want to bring you back 2 years ago when you were serving in Jordan, and how Jordan reacted to what was happening across the border in Israel, the atrocities that took place on October 7th, and also the reaction to Israel's very forceful and very hard reaction to those atrocities, and how the Jordanian identification with the Palestinian cause is such a significant factor in Jordanian political and social affairs. It should be on,
I think great. First of all, thank you so much for having me, Jason. It's a real honor to be here and to be marking this anniversary, which is so momentous. And I would just say, before I dive into Jordan specifically, one thing that I've been reflecting on the occasion of marking this anniversary is the durability and resilience of the Abraham Accords, and of course of the peace treaties with Jordan, 31 years now, and Egypt now approaching 50 almost. I think we're at 47. My math clearly is not that good. So, and that's amazing. As you think about the past 2 years in particular, what a challenging and vicious and difficult and turbulent time it's been in the Middle East, that you have the endurance of all of these agreements. I was just listening to what my friend and colleague Dana Stroul was saying, and I heartily endorse that in terms of an infrastructure is still there. Rewinding to 2 years ago, look, my phone started ringing off the hook as soon as there were reports coming in of what was going on October 7th. Jordan, again, a longtime partner of Israel, the longest border that Israel has, a lot of cooperation in many different spheres. Jordanians immediately knew within the government what a catastrophic event this was and the implications of what lay ahead. And the implications also for Jordan. Jordan, I would argue, is a country in the region that, the country in the region other than Israel and the Palestinian territories that has been so deeply impacted, the most deeply impacted by this war, by virtue of demography 65% of their population is Palestinian or of Palestinian descent. And geography, business has been, their economy has been dramatically impacted, particularly tourism, which makes up a staggering percentage of GDP. I encourage everybody to go to Petra right now, because you will see that wonder of the world virtually empty. And that has had knock-on effects on Jordan that have been very, very significant, aside from the political ramifications of it. So I would say that from the outset, there was deep, deep, deep concern and horror about what was unfolding and what lay ahead.
Not long before the atrocities of October 7th, there was an agreement that was reached between Jordan and Israel, funded by the United Arab Emirates, to provide electricity from solar cells in a big solar panel farm that was going to take place in northern Jordan, and water would be returned to a greater degree of water sharing from Israel into Jordan. Very ambitious project, frozen by what happened on October 7th and the reaction to what happened on October 7th. And yet, I remember not long after that, I was at the Manama Dialogue in Bahrain, and I spoke to Foreign Minister Ayman Safadi, and I asked, frozen for all time or just for the duration of this crisis? Because it's so clear that that's in the best interest of Jordan and Israel. What is your sense of that kind of project and other kinds of projects that can get back on track when we get through this crisis? How committed is Jordan to maintaining this relationship with Israel and to benefiting and to telling its people that it's benefiting from this relationship with Israel? Always been very complicated.
Always been very complicated. Look, that project that you referenced, Prosperity Blue, Prosperity Green, it's an excellent project, and one that I was very keen to be working on and tried throughout the duration of my time in Jordan. Unfortunately, the circumstances were such that it was not the moment that we're able to advance it as much as we would like to. But as you rightly point out, something like that and many other projects are in everybody's interest. I think about something that Dana just referenced, which is the Negev Forum. From 2022, if we want to rewind to the spring of 2022, you had a meeting near Sde Boker of the foreign ministers of the United States, of the UAE, his first visit to Israel, Bahrain, Morocco, and Israel, and Egypt, all coming together and creating what then became this forum to try and pull together and knit together these bilateral agreements into a more coherent infrastructure for cooperation on the issues that you heard Dana mention, issues as disparate as promoting tourism regionally, how can you do that, water scarcity, food security, business promotion, health, in addition to security. And those efforts move forward to culminate in January of 2023 with a meeting of these working groups of the people-to-people and expert-to-expert discussions, very, very detailed on just the types of things that people want to cooperate on and countries want to cooperate on and need to. It was the largest gathering of Arabs and Israelis in such a forum since the Madrid conference. And the next steps were further meetings of the working groups, a ministerial, and unfortunately that was all derailed by October 7th. I don't think that there's not a prospect for resuscitating projects like that, resuscitating projects like Prosperity Blue, Prosperity Green. But I also think that as there was in 2022 and 23, a component raised by our Arab partners about the need to address Palestinian needs and how can the Palestinians benefit from this and such projects and how can they participate, that will continue to be the case. And so this vision of a more integrated, a more prosperous and peaceful region, in order to enable it, I think it requires progress on a vision that both Israelis and Palestinians buy into of the way forward. And I think that in addition to the incredible challenges presented by the Gaza conflict, another challenge is just that. Is there a prospect in Israel where, you know, there's discussion of annexation right now, the tactical strike yesterday that has strategic implications that I think, as Dana outlined, and I agree, can be so damaging. Is there an appetite? Is there a real prospect for trying to find a way forward? And the same on the Palestinian side. Can you find a coherent way forward, and with all the complications that if we start talking about, we will completely derail our discussion. But I would just say at a baseline level, I don't think that there is a viable way towards that vision in such projects without parallel movement forward on the Israeli-Palestinian front.
So talk about the centrality of the Palestinian issue for Jordan, for the king of Jordan, for the people of Jordan. You talked about the significant portion of the Jordanian population that is of Palestinian origin. Is there similarly recognition on the part of the leaders of Jordan, business leaders, political leaders, that a failed Palestinian state would be a disaster for everyone, including for Jordan, that we shouldn't be impatient in moving in the direction of a Palestinian state? We should understand the many conditions that have to be met for it to be a successful state. Or is there a rush to say, tomorrow there needs to be recognition of, at this point, non-existent Palestinian state? Will that really advance the prospect of rights and benefits for the Palestinian people? And if we go in that direction of a premature creation of a Palestinian state, does that not also pose risks for the Kingdom of Jordan?
I think there's a keen sense of the array of risks and dangers for Jordan from across the array of players in Jordan. I don't think anybody would characterize there any rush towards a Palestinian state. I mean, I think there's a much longer view that they've been at this for quite a long, long time. I think there's more of a challenge, and it's a challenge among Jordanians. I think arguably also a challenge among Palestinians and Israelis, and perhaps more broadly in the Arab world. I haven't looked at the polling more broadly recently. That peace is possible. And people just don't believe that that there is a viable way forward anymore, I'd say, from a Jordanian perspective. They look across at the West Bank, in addition to what is going on in Gaza, but they look at the West Bank and they say, there's a diminishing piece of real estate for a Palestinian state. And so how is this going to be a viable sovereign entity? One that they are very keen to support because it is in Jordan's best interest, and they view it as in Israel's best interest also. And so they're kind of dumbfounded as they look across the river right now and are wondering, what is Israel's long-term plan? What's the game plan? What does Israel want? And Jordan knows very much what it wants. It wants a viable, sovereign state of Palestine living in peace and security next to a state of Israel and a state of Jordan that is peaceful and stable and prosperous. But I think there is a concern, certainly among the younger generation. How is this actually going to be realized? And so that's why you hear from a lot of young Jordanians, from a lot of young Palestinians, and obviously from a lot of young Israelis, but who I think are defining it in a different way, about one state and a lack of belief in two states.
At the same time, there continue to be benefits to Jordan from the relationship with Israel in terms of gas, in terms of water, in terms of security. Security cooperation is essential. That commitment to maintaining that relationship, which has survived all kinds of challenges for the last 20, whatever it is, years.
31.
31, excuse me. Okay, your math is actually so much better than mine, it turns out. That's significant, and that must be celebrated. Do the people of Jordan recognize the benefits that have accrued to the Kingdom of Jordan from this relationship with Israel? Could more be said about that, or is the current environment so difficult, so challenging, that it's not even possible to talk about the benefits?
I think the current environment is a particularly challenging one. It's one of the things that I find frustrating on all sides as I look at, again, the durability of the relationship with Egypt, the relationship with Jordan. I don't think that's something that is fully celebrated or appreciated in Israel or in Jordan or in Egypt. It's just not something that those fundamental relationships, which really are key, those are the key Arab partners for Israel. I think it merits significant recognition. I do think that it's a very, very difficult time on all sides for that recognition publicly. I also think that I'm not sure how much it is recognized in Israel, the incredible reputational damage in the Arab world that has accrued with the war in Gaza. I know a lot of folks from across the region, not just Jordan, who are folks who are deep believers in peace and are despondent because it's very difficult for them to see how Israel recovers from this and how you further the cause of peace, which there are a lot of people who are keen to do so, but because it's so hard to extend a hand right now, in their view, given what has been going on. And public sentiment is real. It's very, very real in Jordan and elsewhere in the Arab world.
Yeah, Lempert, I wanted to actually end on a hopeful note, and I'm trying to draw from your last comment some recognition that the relationship between Jordan and Israel has been important to both countries. We need to build on that relationship, celebrate that relationship, even at a time when public celebrations are very difficult to envision. But the relationship is hugely important, and it's important to the United States as well.
It's absolutely something that should be celebrated. And I think about, as you look at the landscape right now regionally, imagine that there weren't peace treaties between Israel and Egypt and Israel and Jordan. Imagine the blood that would have been shed. And I think those two agreements are actually the best advertisement for further peace agreements. The lives that they have saved, the cooperation that they have enabled, but it also is a testament to the fact that you make peace with enemies. And that is where, if you rewind much farther back than we have yet, that is what the situation was 50, 40 years ago. And leaders took risks and brought their peoples along with them. And in the case of Egypt, obviously, a risk that tragically ended in the death of President Sadat. But I think that those agreements are the best poster children for moving forward, hopefully in the future when the situation enables it.
Yeah, Lempert, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so we are now returning to our interview with Jason Isaacson on what is going on from the perspective of AJC in the region and also here in the U.S. We ended our conversation, I think, in an important point that Ambassador Lempert just talked about, but you had mentioned the Palestinian component to this. And we have been seeing this come up time and time in our discussions today. And so I wanted to ask you, Jason, speak to us about how the Israeli-Palestinian conflict fits into the future of the Abraham Accords. Is this something that, I mean, initially when people started talking about this, it was the the outside-in approach. Make peace with the Arab world, then you'll be able to make peace with the Palestinians. There are those who said, no, if you want to make peace with the Arab world, you have to make peace with the Palestinians. How crucial is this to the future of the Abraham Accords?
Thank you for the question. Hugely important question, unavoidable question. Let me tell you what AJC has been saying across the region for 30 plus years. If you want to advance the well-being of the Palestinian people, you want to advance the political rights for the Palestinian people, you want to put the Palestinians on the pathway to an independent state, you're not helping the Palestinians by ignoring Israel, by pretending that Israel doesn't exist. You will help the Palestinians if you engage Israel. And what we have seen over the last 5 years is actually a couple of proofs of that concept. When in June of 2020, Ambassador Yusuf Al-Taiba wrote that editorial, that op-ed rather, in Yediot Ahronot, saying that the UAE was prepared for normalization of relations with Israel if annexation stops, an annexation that had been planned. That sent a message. And you had engagement with Israel, and you had a freeze in the annexation plan. And then when a week or so ago, Assistant Minister for Foreign Affairs of the UAE wrote, well, actually she wrote a column before this in the Financial Times, but she was interviewed by the Times of Israel last week, and she talked about this latest annexation plan being a red line for the UAE, and it would basically freeze the Abraham Accords and prevent them from expanding, maybe even surviving. It sent a shock through the Israeli political system, and it stopped that process. The Arab states that have a relationship with Israel have leverage, have political capital, that they should continue to use wisely. They should also understand Israel's situation. They should understand the trauma that Israel suffered on October 7th, the necessity of eliminating the terrorist threat that Israel has long faced. And privately, they often express that to us, Benji, as you know well. Sometimes not so easy for them to express it publicly. But in their advocacy for a Palestinian state, they also must be sensitive to how Israelis feel. And I have heard this privately. I would like to hear it more publicly. AJC, on our own for decades, have advocated a two-state solution, but we are really sensitive to the difficulty of advancing a two-state solution when there is corrupt and ineffective and politically reckless Palestinian leadership, unfortunately, that is in security cooperation with Israel, but also rewards acts of terror against Israelis. And the Israeli people, having seen what happened on October 7th and knowing the reaction by too many of their neighbors to what happened on October 7th, which was support, not condemnation, have no interest in having an independent Palestinian state right next door. But with leadership and with moderation and with increasing signs of engagement, I think we'll punch through that. It's going to take a while. And that will help enable the expansion of Arab-Israeli peace. We cannot pretend that Arab-Israeli peace will continue to widen in the absence of a political path for the Palestinians. Whether that means a full-fledged non-militarized state or something a little bit less than that because of the complications of geography and politics and everything else. But there has to be some kind of a political path forward. There has to be negotiations. There have to be provisions made for self-governance, for autonomy for the Palestinian people. In that context, I see no impediment to continued expansion of Arab-Israeli peace, as we have heard again and again in our travels across the region, and we've been everywhere across the region. That's the direction that leaders, that wise leaders want to go, as you know.
So let's pull on this thread of leadership, which, as you're saying, is sometimes the source of great frustrations, great limitations, but also the source of huge potential. Let's examine our own country. Where do you think the Trump administration has been? Where do you think there's opportunities? And where would you like to see them go?
I mean, it's very clear that the president is committed to building on the success of 2020. And it will be part of his legacy. I mean, there's a lot of joking about his candidacy for a Nobel Peace Prize. But in fact, if we do see the realization of full Arab-Israeli peace, the man will undoubtedly deserve a Nobel Peace Prize. But whatever, whether there's a prize or not, the successes of 2020 with the UAE and Bahrain and Morocco and Sudan, if it figures out its own political situation, we'll get back on this track as well. Those are amazing historic achievements, and we can build on that. And I know that that's a commitment of the president and of Steve Witkoff, who, as you know, was in a program that AJC sponsored, that AJC organized, you organized, in Washington on February 25th, where he talked about the president's vision and the work that he is doing to try to advance Arab-Israeli understanding and peace. There is no question about the commitment. There are a lot of other distractions. There are a lot of other issues that the president is dealing with, and that's not the issues that we're trying to discuss today as we're marking the 5th anniversary of the Abraham Accords. But on the question of Middle East peace and cooperation and understanding and the U.S. role in advancing all of that, and we heard from Dana Stroul about, and from Yael, about the role that the United States continues to play in a very substantial security context of bringing these countries together with U.S. role. There will be a U.S. role somehow in the rebuilding of Gaza when this is all over, whether it's U.S. financing or U.S. leadership in organizing the rebuilding of Gaza or the administration of Gaza in partnership with Arab states, in partnership with the Palestinian Authority theoretically, although that's obviously an issue of some controversy in Israel. There will continue to be a hugely important U.S. role, and AJC will continue to do everything we possibly can to highlight that, to celebrate that, and to work with the administration and with members of Congress. And we have seen members of Congress here today, and we will continue to see them as in the course of the afternoon, who are so fully supportive of that.
So take it a step further. What would you want to say to Steve Witkoff? What would you want to say to President Trump? What would you like to see at this moment, which is a moment of, I think we've been talking about, of huge hope, huge opportunity, and huge challenge? What steps should be taken? How do we seize the moment?
I mean, you and I have talked about this a lot in our office as well. There needs to be a plan for moving forward. There needs to be a day after plan. We have seen something from the League of Arab States put forward by Egypt and with the role of contribution of the UAE and other countries as well.
By the way, talking about frustration, that 106-page plan made how many mention of Hamas?
I don't know that there was one.
Not one.
But the U.S. needs to have a plan, and Israel, frankly, needs to have a plan as well. And we'll get there. But we need to have this war over. From the administration's perspective, there needs to be continued engagement. A fuller team in the National Security Council devoted to these issues. You and I have been conscious of the key role played by the NSC and by the State Department in moving forward. There need to be, I mean, Steve Witkoff has lots of portfolios. How we can manage to keep it all, keep everything on track at once. Ukraine and the Middle East is beyond me, but he has amazing energy and commitment, and I know he has a small team that's working with him as well. We need to make the most robust possible investment by the United States in advancing the gains that were made in 2020. It is still possible to move this forward and necessary to move this forward.
Thank you. I'm looking behind us. AJC Center for a New Middle East, an initiative announced by our CEO, Ted Deutsch, 2 years ago now? 2.5 years? A year and a half ago?
Yeah.
We officially launched in February of this year. Tell us the story of the Center for New Middle East. What are the hopes? What are the goals? Why now?
Well, why now? It's never too soon. We launched the Center for New Middle East in an effort to expand on the work that AJC has been committed to for decades, not just in the 30-plus years that I've been working on this, but in going back to the 1950s and 60s when AJC had delegations going to Morocco and Tunisia and other parts of the Arab world to bring people together, to recognize the commonalities, the benefits of cooperation, the role of the indigenous Jewish populations of the Middle East. I remember, Benji, and you and I have talked about this many times, my first meeting with King Mohammed VI of Morocco, just a few weeks after he ascended to the throne 26 years ago, I think it was, when he talked about his 400,000 subjects in Israel. reminding us all of the fact that Jews are native to the Middle East, not just in Israel, but across the Middle East. We are committed to making sure that Jews are safe in the region. We are committed to making sure that the people of the region can benefit from regional integration, regional cooperation, which is why we spend so much time traveling across the region, introducing people to who we are as a people, who the role that we can play as a friend of the Arab world in Washington as the Arab world moves closer to recognizing, protecting Jewish communities and recognizing the benefit from a relationship with Israel. This is the work that we have continued to do. We now are able to do it better and with more resources by creating the Center for New Middle East that was announced in June of 2024.
Amazing.
Should we give people a coffee break or not?
I think, let me ask you one more question, and then we can give a coffee break. You first came to AJC 91. Share with us some of the stories in your tenure that have stuck with you. And when you think back about them, what about those stories, and I know you shared some of them, what about those stories really took and why?
Well, I really should have written down a few little anecdotes so I could be very entertaining here. But I will say that I started in July of 1991, just 3 months before the Madrid Peace Conference of October 1991, which was the first opportunity for Israelis to sit across tables with a lot of their neighbors who they had been at war with just a few years before. And it was an opportunity for me, representing AJC, to sit among journalists and leaders from that region and start making friends. And I tried to build on those relationships and, along with AJC staff and lay colleagues, to introduce people to leaders across the region, people in think tanks, people in the media, people in academia. Look, I've also heard crazy things, and you have as well in some of our meetings, about the role that the United States has played across the region, often a very nefarious role as interpreted by some of the people we would speak with, and lots of misunderstandings of who the Jewish people are and the legitimacy of the Jewish state. I hope we were able to clarify some people's thinking about this and correct the record, and have also worked very closely with Jewish community leaders in Tunisia and Morocco and Bahrain, which has a tiny but really important Jewish community as well. Thank you, Hind. And also representing, and I mentioned this earlier, but I want to emphasize this, as a Jewish organization that has 25 offices across the United States and feels an enormous responsibility for the protection of our minority, but of other minority communities as well, and that has a role to play in talking with members of Congress and representing our concerns, our community's concerns about democracy, about human rights, about the role of the United States. Having us as an ally of Arab states that will recognize Israel, that will interact with Israel, that will stand to benefit from the relationship with Israel is significant. We can play that role. We have, in the past, played that role in standing up for Arab countries that have maybe had political issues in the United States that needed to be addressed. Because of the role that they have played in advancing a relationship with Israel and in protecting Jewish communities, we've been able to play that role. And I guess I would lastly say that among the issues that we have advocated is the recognition of Moroccan Sahara, an issue that matters to us because it matters to the people of Morocco and it matters to the King of Morocco. And that's all part of the relationship that AJC has developed, a relationship of trust, of mutual support with governments across that region. And as that country continues to stick with its relationship with Israel and continues to be an important partner of the United States, we will continue to play that role with that country and with other countries across that region.
All right, thank you, Jason. More to come, but I think we'll give everybody a 5-minute coffee break before we return to the program.
Thank you, Benji. Again, if you're just joining us on the live stream, I'm Jason Isaacson. I'm the American Jewish Committee's Chief Policy and Political Affairs Officer, and we're continuing our program marking the 5th anniversary of the Abraham Accords. And I am pleased now to introduce Representative Mike Lawler of New York, Chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Subcommittee on the Middle East and North Africa, and the author of legislation establishing a special envoy for the Abraham Accords, a measure that was signed into law in the last Congress. As the chair of the Middle East and North Africa Subcommittee, Representative Lawler plays a leading role in shaping U.S. policy toward the region, advancing diplomacy, regional integration, and strategic partnerships. He recently returned from his first congressional delegation as chair, during which he visited Saudi Arabia, Israel, and Jordan, engaging directly with regional leaders and stakeholders. We're looking forward to hearing his reflections and insights from this important trip. Please join me in welcoming Representative Mike Lawler to the stage. Mr. Chairman.
It's the Jewish rep, Mr. Goldman. He's actually Jewish. Tell the story in the gallery. Oh, yeah. Some people actually think I'm Jewish and did not think he was. And he's more famous with yes. But that's okay. It's good to be here with all of you. And sorry, I was slightly preoccupied because it looks like Charlie Kirk was just shot at an event. And this is the challenge in our country, and it's a challenge in our politics, and it's emblematic of what we're seeing, obviously, across the country and around the globe. The willful acts of violence that people engage in with those they disagree with, and we see it obviously very acutely with respect to the anti-Semitism that we have seen not just on college campuses, but in these protests around the globe, which is all the more reason why 5 years after the Abraham Accords were signed, it is critically important that we continue to promote them, that we continue to strengthen them. It is one of my top priorities as chair of the Middle East and North Africa Subcommittee to make sure that we are not only strengthening the relationship between Arab states and the State of Israel, but that we are doing everything in our power to normalize, to bring about peace and stability, to end the reign of terror that has consumed the Middle East for so long. Earlier this year, I traveled to Saudi Arabia, to Israel, and to Jordan, and we talked extensively about the threats from Iran and its terror proxies and what that does to undermine stability and peace in the region. We talked about the importance of normalization, especially between Saudi Arabia and Israel. We talked about the important relationship between Jordan and Israel. Jordan has been one of our greatest allies in the Middle East, and they have been a great ally to Israel and done a lot to intervene, to prevent, to protect. And so it's important as we move forward that the Abraham Accords fulfilled their commitment, that we do bring about greater economic and military cooperation between the U.S., Israel, and Arab states. It's why the President's trip to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and UAE earlier this year was so important, because we have to be able to bring our Arab partners along. The world today is in a much better place. As shocking as that may seem to some, it's in a better place than it was prior to October 7th. And what I mean by that is Hamas and Hezbollah have been largely decimated. Assad's regime in Syria has fallen. Iran's air defenses, ballistic missiles program, and its nuclear ambitions have been largely decimated. And there is a real yearning in Arab states for peace. Everyone is tired of the fighting, of the terrorism, of the conflict. But in order for us to get there, in order for us to really forge this path forward, the conflict in Gaza has to come to an end. And what I have said many times to my colleagues, and to those around the globe, if you want a ceasefire, if you want the conflict to come to an end, there's only one way for that to occur, and that's for Hamas to surrender and release the hostages. In the absence of that, this notion that Israel should unilaterally disarm, I'd love to ask the French or the Brits or anybody else, who is going to remove Hamas? Who is going to return the hostages? They don't have an answer. They don't want one. It's easier to just say we want to recognize a Palestinian state, whatever the hell that means. But yet none of them can tell you who would be in charge, where it would be, or what the boundaries would be. Because most of them don't actually understand Oslo, and most of them don't actually understand that Area C is about 60% of Judea and Samaria. They'll never tell you that. They'll just talk about Israeli settlers. But this is the challenge that Israel faces, and it's why the Abraham Accords is so important. There is real opportunity, but it requires resolve, it requires strength, it requires accountability. I just came back from a trip to Italy, Tunisia, and Morocco. Morocco, obviously, a key partner in the Abraham Accords. They want normalization across the Middle East and North Africa. They want greater economic cooperation. They want greater military cooperation. They want to be an exporter of peace and stability and security. So there is a lot of work that my committee is doing and will continue to do, whether it is focusing on Syria and how we stabilize that country. And by the way, the prospects of normalization there would be huge for the region. The prospects from the Gulf to the Mediterranean and having a cohesive economy in which there is greater trade, there is greater tourism, there is greater security, is possible, but only if we continue to lead, and the Abraham Accords are the path forward. That's why in my first term, Congressman Torres and I introduced and passed the Special Envoy for the Abraham Accords Act. And I continue to push the administration to fill that position because having someone focused exclusively on that is vital. And when you look at some of the other issues, in particular related to Iran, that is vital. Ending that illicit oil trade with China, crippling sanctions to stop their funding of terrorism, and long-term, having a situation in which the Palestinians are free from their oppressors, Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. All of this is interconnected, all of it vital, and we continue to make progress. I think President Trump has done a very good job in the Middle East, leading, forging a path forward, bringing our Arab partners along, but there's more work to be done. So I appreciate AJC and the great work that you do day in, day out on issues from the U.S.-Israel relationship to combating anti-Semitism to standing up for the Jewish people here in America. And I thank you all for being here as we celebrate and mark the 5th anniversary of the Abraham Accords. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I am now pleased to introduce Representative Craig Goldman of Texas, serving his first term in Congress, and he has quickly demonstrated a strong commitment to advancing U.S. engagement in the Middle East by taking on the role of co-chair of the House Abraham Accords Caucus. Representative Goldman brings new leadership and energy to this important bipartisan effort focused on expanding peace, stability, and cooperation throughout the region. His dedication to fostering enduring partnerships reflects a deep understanding of the strategic importance of the Abraham Accords framework. Just last month, he participated in a congressional delegation to Israel, gaining firsthand insights into the opportunities and challenges shaping the Middle East today. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Goldman to the stage. Thank you so much.
Well, thank y'all very much for having me, and thank you for being here. As I tell everyone who comes to Washington, D.C., it's greatly important that we hear from you, that you advocate for what you believe in, and certainly what y'all do matters to everybody here on the Hill. There's no question about it, especially in this day and age. I did just return from Israel. In fact, AIPAC sponsors a trip for the freshmen every single year. We had about 30 Republicans. The Democrats had a trip as well. We overlapped on one day, which was an extremely special day, because when you mention that you're going to Israel and you mention you're going to southern Israel, in the past, when I've been there, when you talk about, yeah, I'm going down to south, it usually means you're going to go float on the Dead Sea or go hang out at a lot. It has a much different meaning now. And we did spend a day down at a kibbutz. We all went to one of the 3 kibbutz that were attacked. And then we spent a day we left there and went straight to the music festival. And if you had one opinion leading into that trip, you come back with a unified opinion after that trip, and certainly get a better understanding of what happened and how indeed it can't happen again, and it shouldn't happen again. And certainly all my colleagues and I have a new understanding of what's going on over there and what we realize is the future over there, and that is that Hamas needs not exist anymore anywhere on this face of this earth. And certainly I believe that was a unified belief after spending that day down south. With that, we did have an incredible rest of the trip. We were all over the country. We did have an audience in front of President Netanyahu. In fact, how he did it is kind of like how I want to do it, is I can come up here and give you a speech of what I think you want to hear about, but I'd much rather hear what's on your mind and you ask questions. So I'm more than happy to talk about the trip to Israel. I can more than happy to talk about my freshman time here. I was 12 years in the Texas State House, and now my first 8 months here being a member of Congress. People ask, what's the difference? What's the same? Well, it's more the same, but it's different. My days are filled with meeting with constituents and meeting with people who come from Texas and meeting with now from people who come all over the United States, which is great. But certainly the committee work is a lot more than it was in Texas. And the walking to get to vote is a lot further. Walking across the street, I did not have to do in Austin. But no, I'd be more than happy to talk about whatever we want. I know we have limited time. I know your next speaker is here, but happy to answer any questions anybody has. And again, really do appreciate you being here.
If you don't mind, maybe you can share being a co-chair of the caucus.
Yeah, sorry, Abraham Accords Caucus. That's right, exactly. I missed the main thing I was here to talk about. So no, it's a great group, and we've met probably 3 or 4 times already, and it's completely bipartisan. That's the one thing I don't like about Congress and Washington D.C. so far that I do hope to change as I move forward in my tenure here. Is that in Austin we do work bipartisan. Texas does work bipartisan. Even though we have the majority of the House, we have the majority of the Senate, we have the governor, we have the lieutenant governor, we have every single statewide. But when you go to the Texas State House and the state Senate, you work in a bipartisan fashion to get things done. We're going to disagree on policy. You're darn right we're going to disagree on policy. You represent your district, I represent mine. Here, unfortunately, it has not been that way. It's completely partisan, and I don't like it. Whether it's in committee, whether it's on the floor, I think we've had very few bipartisan bills voted on in committee. I could probably count on one hand, and then very few on the floor. And that's not government for the people, by the people. That, in my opinion, needs to change. But Abraham Accords is a totally different story. When I was asked to be one of the new co-chairs with Debbie Wasserman Schultz, we've had several events and dinners, and it's great camaraderie. We all agree on the same thing. And by the way, speaking of that, every single member, and I need to do a better job of this, so remind me of this when we go back to the office, every single Republican on the trip with me said, I didn't know about the Abraham Accords, I want to sign on to them. So it's my job now to get everybody who was on the trip with us to sign on to that. So that's on me. So as you're touring around and encouraging that to members' offices, be sure that you follow. If you don't follow up with them, make sure that our office follows up with them, because I'll twist their arms if they haven't done already. But no, they have a complete understanding of what they are and how important they are, and understanding of that's the path forward for that region of the world. So it's a great honor to be not only on that caucus, but an active member of it. Thank you so much. Sure. All right. Well, thank y'all. Thank y'all again for being here. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, Congressman Goldman. I am now very pleased to be able to introduce my and AJC's very dear friend, Senator Jacky Rosen of Nevada, who serves on both the Senate Committee on Armed Services and the Foreign Relations Committee, where she is the ranking member of the Near East Subcommittee. I also must say that I've had the enormous pleasure and privilege of traveling to Israel with Senator Rosen. We also used to be neighbors on Capitol Hill.
Eating matzo pie.
But that's just kind of personal.
It's all right. Everybody likes matzo pie, right?
As a founding member and co-chair of the Senate Abraham Accords Caucus and sponsor of legislation to create and codify enhanced regional frameworks, Senator Rosen has been a leading voice in advancing U.S. partnerships with Israel and its Arab allies, working tirelessly to promote peace and security across the region. Earlier this year, she traveled to Israel, Jordan, and Iraq, engaging directly with regional leaders about humanitarian partnerships, ways to counter Iranian aggression, and to assess challenges and opportunities for strengthening stability and further cooperation. Her continued leadership in Congress is critical to sustaining and expanding the Abraham Accords and ensuring that U.S. policy remains focused on long-term peace and partnership in the region. Please join me in welcoming Senator Jacky Rosen. Okay, we have microphones?
We do. Microphones and water.
Exactly.
Two most important things.
And you know we're being live streamed as well.
I do. Hello, everyone out there. Thank you for watching.
Senator Rosen, as co-chair of the Abraham Accords Caucus in the Senate, you've supported bipartisan legislation such as the Regional Integration and Normalization Act, which, among other things, seeks to develop a comprehensive framework for economic engagement with Accords countries and key partners. This legislation also authorized funding to expand programs that bring Israelis and Arabs together through science, energy, interfaith, agriculture, and youth engagement. Unfortunately, the bill was introduced just a few months before October 7th and never advanced into law. But reflecting today on 5 years of the Abraham Accords and the current situation in the region, what makes you believe that legislation and initiatives like this still work?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for inviting me and for your partnership, your friendship, and the deep work and knowledge that you have and that you share with all of us every day to help us do our job. And I want to thank all of you here for the same thing, and of course, everybody watching, because none of us do this work alone. We have to do this work in solidarity, and we have to do it in such a way that we I guess I'm going to say this and follow up on what the congressman just said. We have to build legislation, here we are, you're in Congress, for the long run. in the Senate and in the House. What does that mean? It means it has to be bipartisan. It can't just fly with the whim of the day, one or another, because we know through all of life, has a series of ups and downs, and we want to build for the long haul. So that means the more people you get on, the more solid it is on any kind of bill, any kind of legislation, the more important it becomes. And so, of course, we're pleased to be here in the fifth anniversary of the Abraham Accords, and when that was signed into law, I co-founded and co-lead, of course, the Abraham Accords Caucus in the Senate, built part on some of those partnerships we started when I built the first ever bipartisan task force to combat anti-Semitism. We had a lot of good framework to start there. We've been able to, I can backtrack to early 2023 before October 7th, and we can go past October 7th to Israel talking about the Abraham Accords, but I want to talk specifically about the Regional Integration Normalization Act, affectionately RINA, we'll just call it RINA, as we do. Some of the things in that legislation have already been signed into law. Some of the pieces and parts have been pulled out. One of the most important ones is that we created a position of the special envoy for the Abraham Accords. We want to push the administration to nominate someone to do this. Why? Because the Abraham Accords set the foundation and the framework for regional cooperation and collaboration, for peace, prosperity, and really for people to get together. We think about the the famous Nita Lowey, the Middle East Partnership for Peace, named after our dear friend Nita Lowey, mentor and friend to all of us. We think about all these relationships and collaborations that we must have. This is where grassroots, when things in civil society work together, it's easier for diplomacy to happen. And so the Abraham Accords, we're going to backtrack, I'll say right before October 7th, when we took our first bipartisan delegation there, myself and James Lankford. We went to Bahrain, UAE, Morocco, and of course Israel. And what we heard from everyone was this, and I maybe COVID had something to do with it, that we are no longer just bound by having a common enemy, but we understand now that the global world we live in, we should be bound in our common collaboration and prosperity. So when you think about the Negev Forum, the subjects that were created, working groups that were created after the formation of Abraham Accords in areas like education, culture, cybersecurity, health, tourism, water, power, and I think there's a whole bevy of them. And people realized that when we collaborate and work together, and we'll just take healthcare, for example, that makes all of us better. When we can take water, we can take power, energy, any of those things. When people on the ground see the benefit of working together, when kids today who are 10 years old know that there's tourism going back and forth, and you see meet people from other areas of the world, and they come back and forth. You go to regions where you haven't gone before. You're sharing restaurants of food maybe you haven't eaten before. When that kid grows up, he's going to say, haven't we always talked to them? Haven't they always come here? Haven't we always vacationed there? When we change education programs, UAE doing Holocaust education for the first time. When we do all of these things, this is where the grassroots civil society, their lives are changed for the better, and they're not afraid of these partnerships, and it makes diplomacy easier, which in the long run, the steps are never easy. Nothing's ever as quick as we want, but this, I believe, is what's in the best interest in the long run for lasting peace and security. Of course, we've been on hold since October 7th, horrific day in the history of Israel and for the world. And we pray every day for the release of the remaining hostages, both dead and alive, the support and help for the families in Gaza that are suffering, that need that humanitarian aid, and to remove Hamas from power, and hope for a day after where this kind of collaboration can create a negotiated two-state solution where we can have peace and prosperity in the region. And it's not easy, never has been in that area of the world, but it doesn't mean that we don't try.
Senator, thank you for that. Talking about the Negev Forum working groups that you mentioned, I'm remembering in January of 1992, at the beginning of the peace process that began with the Madrid Peace Conference in October of '91 in Spain, some of those same topics were on were subject of these working groups at that time. In 1992, on tourism, on arms control, on water, the Middle East Desalination Research Center in Oman grew out of that. The idea of regional cooperation to solve common problems, countries working together with Israel, with the United States playing an important role. It's an old idea. We kind of lost that for many years, for decades, but it's now been revived because of the Abraham Accords. Talk about the support in Nevada for this relationship between the United States and Israel, this relationship between the United States and Abraham Accords countries. What are the impacts, what are the benefits for the United States in this kind of regional cooperation that you've helped encourage?
Well, I think the benefits, well, we can talk specifically about memos of understanding on water. I live in the desert Southwest, southern Nevada. All of Nevada, been in severe persistent drought for decades. And so we've had memos of understanding with our Desert Research Institute on, I'll say, water smart technology. Water is, people say water's the new oil, but honestly, water, human life cannot exist without water. So this is where Nevada and is the state of Israel have a lot in common. In fact, much of the West Coast. When we were there in 2023, we met with the folks doing the Prosperity Blue-Green Project, where we would, UAE would fund it, Jordan would build solar panels, sending power into Israel. Israel will build desalination, sending much-needed water into Jordan. And these would be these cooperative partnerships. But we also met with some civil engineers. The Jordan River, used much in the same way, has a different history than the Colorado River, but the same as we use the Colorado River in the West Coast. And so a lot of the ways that they're working with water smart technology for farming, how they're actually, and I'm not an engineer, so I'm not going to explain this correct in an engineer way, but they're building, I don't want to say it's a pipeline, but water lines to let the Jordan River heal itself by taking water from other places and bringing it at the top of the Jordan River, if you will, and allowing it to flow down and healing the river and allowing it to be used. These are things that we're exporting to what we need to do. So this kind of thing just doesn't stay in the Middle East. It goes to not just the Colorado River, but things like this go around the world. But these partnerships, what I want to say is collaboration for the benefit of civil society, for all of us. If there are benefits in healthcare or technology, it just doesn't stay there. If they're finding ways to smart farm better, use water better, manage their rivers better, the drought situation better, well, we're going to use that here or wherever around the world. So so sometimes in Las Vegas, I think the tourism slogan, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, but what happens in these collaborations and cooperations helps us all be healthier, be smarter, be safer. And I think that when we see the benefit of what our friendships can do, whether it's trade and jobs and education, then this is how we change those hearts and minds. This is how we ultimately beat our adversaries who wish to defeat that, who wish to lead with hate instead of lead with hope. And I believe that the Abraham Accords are still those kernels of hope for this collaborative future. We need to, I'll use the water analogy, sow that seed of hope and let that blossom. And through all of those things, we can hopefully push back those that wish to do so many harm.
I think the last question, because I know that you have a hard stop as well, Senator.
Votes, you're here. There, you know how that goes.
But thank you for coming over from the Senate to this, and I'm sorry that we didn't do this in one of the Senate office buildings.
Next year.
Okay,
Come on
we will.
over. We'll help you get a room.
But talk about the challenges that exist today to expanding the circle of peace between Israel and its Arab neighbors.
So I was in May in the Middle East. We were in Israel, we were in the West Bank, we were in Jordan, and we were all over Iraq and talking to not just government leaders, with refugee camps, civil society, NGOs. We know the attack on Iran's nuclear sites had not yet happened, but now we know Iran is at its weakest point in for sure decades, maybe even longer. We know is Syria and Lebanon on the cusp of maybe a new day. And what everyone said, what they said in 2023, what all the dignitaries and I've spoken with and folks since that time is that don't leave us. It's important to stay. It's important to fund what are the cooling platters. If we give families food, then some of those young kids are not radicalized to go feed the family. What are the cooling saucers? What are the things that we can do to promote peace and things in the region? And now we talked about, of course, the war in Gaza, but we'll talk about all the other things that folks wish for. And they said, we have to defeat what's going on. And there are small things with large impact that we can do to change the situation. So they were asking us to please not leave, because if we leave a vacuum, well, and Iran gets a chance to get back in, and China's right there on its heels, we know who want to fill that vacuum. And it's not with something good. And so how we think about the Abraham Accords, how we think about our diplomacy. I'm not in the State Department, so we legislate, and we're not in the administration, but how we try to potentiate this to promote what we hope for, and hopefully that pushes down or pushes away what I dare say I'll just call hate in the region, or our adversaries in the region. I think this is what everyone wants to see. There's a ways to get there because we don't have enough time to discuss what's happening in Gaza, but there is the desire there for everyone that we spoke to, both in person, on the phone, before October 7th and since, and I'm going to do everything that I can to try to move towards that.
And also very significant that the countries that signed up for the Abraham Accords 5 years ago have maintained that commitment.
No one's left.
Even though they're not necessarily politically popular in their countries, the leaders know that this is the direction that those countries need to go.
And there are others that told me that they still want to join. Yeah. We just have to be able to find that way for that on-ramp. And like I said, we have a ways to get there because of what's happening in Gaza, but if we can create a ceasefire, get the hostages home, get the humanitarian aid, begin to work with everyone on a workable plan for the future, we're going to give people an on-ramp to join the Abraham Accords and begin to take this inflection point. We're at a moment when we can change the trajectory of our region, and we want to, and we have to give them those on-ramps to get there.
Senator Jacky Rosen, thank you for your leadership in maintaining American commitment to the Abraham Accords, and frankly, in your leadership in the fight against anti-Semitism. You've been a staunch ally of ours, of all of ours in the room. Thank you again for being here today.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Next year in the Senate.
Ambassador, thank you for being here. Ambassador, thank you for being here. I am really lucky and privileged to be able to announce that we have a special guest who is going to say a few words to us as well. But again, if you're just joining us on the live stream, again, I'm Jason Isaacson, the Chief Policy and Political Affairs Officer of the American Jewish Committee, and we are now marking the 5th anniversary of the Abraham Accords in a series of conversations that we've been having across the day with members of Congress and other stakeholders. And I am really fortunate. We just learned earlier today that the Assistant to the President of the Republic of Azerbaijan, head of the Department of Foreign Policy Affairs, of the Presidential Administration of the Republic of Azerbaijan, Hikmat Agiev, is here in Washington, had meetings today, and is here with us right now, and is going to say a few words of greeting as we discuss the Abraham Accords and the possibility of even closer relationship between Azerbaijan and the State of Israel. Thank you so much for being here today, sir. Please, Excellency, come up and say a few words to us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, dear ambassadors, dear friends, and it's also a great honor and privilege to me and to be invited to this excellent conference and 5th anniversary of the Abraham Accords. For that occasion, I really congratulate State of Israel, all friends of Israel on this particular occasion, and 5th anniversary of the Abraham Accords that greatly contributed to the Israel's relations with their friends and partners. Sometimes Azerbaijan is also asked that when Azerbaijan will join to the Abraham Accords. Half jokingly, I say that please don't preach converted, because Azerbaijan since 1992 had a strategic relationship with the State of Israel. We are on a continuous efforts to further development our relationship. Therefore, sometimes, again, jokingly saying that joining the Abraham Accords for Azerbaijan, it will be downgrade of our relationship or upgrading of our relationship, because philosophy of the Abraham Accords has been designed for the State of Israel and it's in a neighborhood, Arab neighborhood mainly. But we support letter and spirit of the Abraham Accords. And Azerbaijan shared also its own experience of building friendly, brotherly relationship with the state of Israel, with some other countries in the Arab world. They also asked our advice and recommendations. Today, Azerbaijani relationship with the state of Israel is a brilliant example of the partnership, trust, and confidence. It's also based thousands of years cooperation and brotherly ties between Jewish people and Azerbaijani people. It's also a brilliant example of how Muslims and Jews and Christians can live side by side, in a sense, and Azerbaijan and Israel is a good illustration for that. I also come to Washington, D.C. with yet another positive message. It's also in the very best spirit of the Abraham Accords, but in our neighborhood, Armenia and Azerbaijan, we also made a peace. We are jointly working towards the winning of the peace. Just 1 month ago, on the 8th of August, President of Azerbaijan, Prime Minister of Armenia, with the witness of the President Trump, made a Camp David of the Caucasus. I compare it with the Camp David, how Camp David changed the entire map of the Middle East, our treaty, but we can call it President Trump's treaty, or Washington Treaty, or Washington Declaration, and transformed Armenia-Azerbaijan relationship. We are moving towards a path, towards a peace, and to change the entire region of the South Caucasus. And being in this particular institution and United States Congress, I take this opportunity to ask all Congress members, please support our agenda of the peace. There are a lot of naysayers in our region. There are a lot of spoilers here and there could happen. But Armenia, Azerbaijan, we are doing our hard work on the region, and brick by brick, we are building our peace agenda. Please support on that. Last thing I would ask in Congress, there is one element that's a relic of the past. It's a 907 section of the Freedom Support Act. It's also time to eradicate it and to give us support on our agenda of the peace. And I hope that Trump corridor that's established in our region, I also call it Panama Channel of the Eurasian landmass. And it will run through Azerbaijan, Armenia. A couple of years ago, with two countries were in the war, but now they are becoming the partners and friendship that are building based on the confidence and partnership. And also support us on that endeavor as well. And thank you for inviting me for this great event, and also ACG, for AJC. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your cooperation. We really appreciate it.
Good afternoon. My name is Andy Marks. I've got the great privilege of serving as one of the co-chairs of AJC's Center for a New Middle East. Today's conversations have explored manifold dimensions of the Abraham Accords, the challenges, the opportunities, the promise for the future. AJC's Center for a New Middle East draws on AJC's unparalleled global advocacy, a network to foster deeper diplomatic, economic, and civic ties between and among Israel and its Arab neighbors, as well as other Muslim-majority states. Through sustained relationship building, dynamic programming, and active U.S. and international engagement, the Center is committed to advancing Israel's integration into a more peaceful and prosperous Middle East, something that is in the interest of not only all the players in the region, but of the United States. In the aftermath of October 7th, amid the enormous challenges facing the region, AJC is developing and pursuing new opportunities to bring Israelis and Arabs closer together with the hope of building lasting trust and ultimately a more peaceful world. It is with this vision in mind that I am so honored to welcome to the stage our final featured speaker, His Excellency Dr. Yael Michael Leiter, current ambassador of Israel to the United States. Ambassador Leiter assumed his post just earlier this year. He's a seasoned policy expert and public servant, and he's held senior positions, including advisor to Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, Chief of Staff to then Finance Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, Deputy Director General of the Ministry of Education, and acting chairman of Israel's Ports Company. He holds degrees in law and political science, a master's in international relations, and a PhD in political philosophy. Beyond his distinguished career, Ambassador Leiter is a devoted family man. He's the father of 8. The grandfather, he'll have to tell you how many, but it's a lot. And tragically, we have to hold in our hearts the fact that his oldest son, Major Moshe Yadiah Leiter, who is a physician and IDF Special Forces officer, fell tragically in combat in Gaza in November 2023. Please join me in welcoming Ambassador Yael Leiter.
Thank you, Andy, for the kind introduction. It's lovely to be with you. I'd like to begin with a prayer. I heard on the way here that an important influencer on the American scene, Charlie Kirk, was shot while he was speaking in the University of Utah. It's horrific when political violence occupies our streets. We're particularly sensitive this year after two of our employees, Yaron Lashinsky and Sarah Milgram, were shot dead at an AJC event just a few blocks from here. We pray for his recovery. We pray that we don't have to face political violence at all, of any form, at any time. Kudos to the AJC on this event. My compliments on all the work you do across the globe. I was pretty surprised not to see Ted here, but I understand that he's in Israel. So we'll forgive him this time, but please tell him that I miss him. It's a great privilege to have His Excellency, the Ambassador from Azerbaijan, and I understand now His Excellency, the Ambassador of Armenia. And this is a historic moment, right? I mean, how many occasions have there been since they met at the White House and signed an agreement? And of course, the special advisor to the President of Azerbaijan, my dear friend, Dr. Hikmat. My staff, and I've got the best staff of any embassy in Washington, prepared remarks for me. And it's a good speech, I got to tell you. I was impressed. But I'm going to ask forgiveness from my staff because I'm going to speak extemporaneously, we say? Not really, because these are issues that I 24/7 live, eat, and breathe. And I'd like to address the elephant in the room. It's a little elephant called Doha. I don't know if you saw this, if you had a vision that, you'd have this conference one day after Doha and one day before September 11th. But you'll see in a few minutes, if I can do it in a few minutes, how this is related to a 5-year anniversary of the Abraham Accords. Okay, I'll try to weave it very quickly. We're in the month of September. We should be cognizant of the importance of time, where we are in time. So when I think of September, the first thing I think of is Black September. In 1970, when King Hussein of Jordan decided that he had enough of Palestinian terrorism. And he launched a military campaign against the Palestine Liberation Organization. A result of Black September was somewhere near 20,000 people who were killed, very short amount of time, and up to 30,000 people who were evicted from Jordan. Some might have said at the time that it wasn't proportional. Have you ever heard that expression before? Proportionality? But apparently, when he was contending with a terrorist organization intent on destroying his kingdom, threatened his country, he acted with determination and rid the country of that terrorist threat. September 1970. September 1972, we send a delegation to the Munich Olympics. And Palestinian terrorists murder our athletes. And then there was another prime minister of Israel, Golda Meir, may she rest in peace. And as a result, she gave an order to track down every single one of the terrorists and eliminate them. And the state of Israel didn't rest until that was done. Because she, like King Hussein, understood that terrorists are hunted and destroyed. September 11th, 3,000 people are killed in one day. In Israel, that would be the equivalent of our October 7th, is about 40 times September 11th. Just do the math. We're a country of 10 million people. You're a country of 330 million people. You do the math, it's 40 September 11th. And we all know that the United States launched a number of wars. We also know that the proportionality in Fallujah and Mosul was, shall we say, disproportionate to the proportionality of our campaign in Gaza. But what I want to point out in particular is that on September 28th, that same month, the United States presented a United Nations Security Resolution, 1373. That's September 28th, 2001. And the resolution reads, it obligates states to prevent and suppress the financing and support of terrorism, including the harboring of terrorists. It was a response to September 11th, and it was adopted by the UN Charter under Chapter 7. I repeat, to prevent and suppress the financing and support of terrorism, including the harboring of terrorists. Now, what is Qatar doing if not financing and supporting terrorism by playing host to Hamas, the very people who sent the terrorists who murdered 6 people sitting at a bus stop in Jerusalem, waiting to go about their business. They were husbands, they were fathers, they were sons, and one pregnant woman. Who sent them? The terrorists we targeted in Doha. They celebrated the murder of these 6 innocents the same way they celebrated on camera the slaughter of 1,200 innocents on October 7th. So Israel acted in the context of what any normal country does. It pursues terrorists and it eliminates them, like King Hussein, like Golda Meir, like the United States of America. Why is that so important to understand as we celebrate 5 years of the Abraham Accords? We're standing alone right now. It's lonely out there, right? Abraham stood alone. Abraham was a very lonely guy. Abraham said to a world that believed that man made God, as historian Max DeMont wrote, Abraham said to a world that said man made God, he said, no, God makes man. It was a revolutionary idea. The Abrahamic faiths, right? Judaism, Christianity, and Islam followed that Abrahamic message. But for a time, it was lonely. He was a revolutionary thinker, Abraham. But over centuries, it caught on. We led the ideational battle. Jesus picked it up, moved it forward to the masses, as did Muhammad later. Christianity had a Reformation 1,500 years after Jesus. And as Professor Bernard Lewis often said, Islam has not yet had its Reformation. And we are now 1,500 years after Muhammad. And there is a battle within Islam. that battle is over whether or not there's going to be an accommodation of Western civilization or not. Are we intent on conquering Western civilization? Are we intent on conquering the Judeo-Christian civilization? Or are we going to accommodate and live side by side Islamic civilization, the great Islamic civilization next to the great Judeo-Christian civilization? That's the battle taking place. And the terrorists, whether in Black September in Jordan, or in Munich, or in Doha, or in Gaza, represent an ideology which says, no, we're not going to accommodate Western civilization. We have to defeat it. And so, if you want to defeat Western civilization, what would be the first thing you do? Listen to what they say. Listen to what they say. The first thing you're going to do is destroy Israel. Because Israel is this Judeo-Christian civilization transplant in the middle of Islam. So what you've got to do is destroy it. Remember that expression that Ahmadinejad was propagandizing around the world? We're the little Satan. America's the big Satan. That's exactly what he means. That we're first, and that's why the first ballistic missiles they built were fired at us. But the distance that they created in their ballistic missiles is enough to, believe it or not, Emmanuel Macron, listening, hit France, other end of Europe. But their space program, they called it, was an intercontinental ballistic missile program to hit the United States. And what Iran did, because the Abraham Accords was moving forward, and because they feared that within this battle within Islam, the Abraham Accords, the accommodationist approach to Israel and the West would win out, they created this idea of a ring of fire. And the ring of fire meant that Iranian proxies, with Hamas in the southwest, and the Houthis in the southeast, and the Hezbollah in the north, and Hezbollah Syria, and Hezbollah Iraq, and the Assad regime, would attack all together. And then, as our borders were attacked, and our civilians slaughtered, Iran would fire missiles to the center of the country, preventing our reservists from being called up. You know the size of Israel. Israel's a tiny little country. I just flew back from Indiana. Israel fits into Indiana. Indiana, one state of the United States, 4.5 times. We're a tiny little country. Our whole width, with Judea and Samaria, is 40 miles. So if we were going to get hit with missiles, ballistic missiles in the center of the country, while we're being attacked all around our periphery, the idea was this ring of fire would overcome Israel's conventional power. And that's why the significance of taking down Iran's nuclear program and its ballistic missile program through Rising Lion and through Midnight Hammer, and by defeating the proxies that are still standing, predominantly that of Hamas, what we're doing is advancing not only Israel's security, but the possibility of going into an Abraham Accord mode 2.0, because we are empowering the moderate elements within Islam. There are those visionaries who have already seen that, right? A predominantly Shiite Muslim country that is not only working towards deepening the relationship on all levels, military, cultural, but is actually serving as a bridge for Israel into Central Asia. Imagine that. All of these Muslim countries adopting, embracing Israel, and Israel embracing them. Think of how much we can accomplish. I heard Senator Rosen talk about water. If we work together to solve food insecurity, think about it, ladies and gentlemen. In a 5-kilometer radius of Tel Aviv, we have all the technological solutions to food insecurity. We just need to work together. And if we still have an idea out there that Israel can be destroyed, and we have people working towards that end, the destruction of Israel. We're not going to be able to get there. So when we hit terrorists in Doha, we are acting in the context of UN Charter, of international law, in the cause of sanity and morality. How can we have people sitting, having Thanksgiving dinners every day as they direct their minions to slaughter innocent people? And as the Prime Minister said, as we mark this 5th year of Abraham Accords, we have put terrorists on notice, wherever they may be, like King Hussein and like Golda before us, and like the United States in pursuit of those responsible for September 11th. We're going to pursue them. And we're going to destroy those who will destroy us, which will enable us to live and bring Western civilization into an area which has barely penetrated, to live side by side with our Muslim neighbors, to develop a future in which humanity will benefit, and together will raise the Human Development Index and advance humanity. That's what Abraham had in mind back then when he said, it's not man who creates God, it's God who creates man. We're acting in his shadow. And we have the possibility. It's difficult because we're in the battlefield now. It's hard to raise our heads and see the sunlight because the war isn't over. But it's going to be over soon. And when it's over, we're going to be able to see a path forward. There are those who say, why aren't you preparing the day after? Well, let me tell you, we're preparing the day after. The day after is going to be brilliant. And for it to succeed, we can't talk too much about it. And it certainly can't be an Israel-sponsored day after to ensure its success. So we'll push forward, we'll take the criticism, but we're going to work together with you, together with wonderful organizations like the AJC and the administration, the Congress. There has never been a closer collaboration between Israel and the American government and the American people as there was on the days leading up to Rising Lion and Midnight Hammer, and that continues to take place. Despite issues that you might hear here and there, the collaboration is deep, it is broad, it is ideological, it is ideational, it is interest-beared, and we're going to move forward, please God, to Abraham Accords 2.0. And I don't know where I'll be in 5 years, but I know AJC will be here, ever stronger than you are today. And I would ask you to please invite me, even if I'm just like a little guy in a think tank, to come here and celebrate Abraham Accords' 10th anniversary. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ambassador, for your remarks. We have now reached the end of our program, and I want to thank everybody for being here. A year and a half ago, you heard Jason talk about this earlier. A year and a half ago, during one of the most difficult times in Israeli-Arab relations, our CEO, Ted Deutsch, stood up on the stage of our Global Forum, our annual conference, and said, we believe in a better future. We believe that Israelis and Arabs can come together amidst all this difficulty, amidst a low point in relations. We believe in a better future. We believe in a better tomorrow. And that is really at the core of what we are commemorating today with the 5th anniversary. What AJC's Center for a New Middle East is trying to do every day moving forward. How can we work together? How can we engage people on the diplomatic level? How can we engage people on the civil society level? And how can we engage people on the economic level? How can we bring people together? Today's gathering, unfortunately, a rare mixture of Democrats and Republicans, coming together, essentially saying, hey, we have differences, but we're overcoming those differences because this is bigger than us. The audience, which I know those on the live stream can't see, a mixture of people from all around the world, Christians, Jews, Muslims, saying, hey, we are coming together to understand how can we do better. So it is an honor to be able to have had this discussion with everybody today. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much to the AJC staff. I know it goes without saying, but all these programs, there is so much that you don't see, and our staff was all crazy running around outside, so a big thank you to everybody. I'm looking forward to meeting Ambassador Leiter's challenge, which is inviting him back here in 5 years and seeing where we are and hopefully how far we've come. Thank you, everybody.